morning my whole life was supposed to end, I was on my knees in the Wang family courtyard, polishing a set of stone steps that nobody was ever going to walk on again. That was the job, 7 years of it. Fetch, kneel, polish, bow, disappear. I was 13 years old and I owned exactly one clean set of clothes, and I was wearing the other set, the one with the hole under the arm. I had a name Lai Guangfu, which is a servant name, the kind of name you give a boy the way you'd name a broom. Guangfu means has wealth. That is the manner's idea of a joke. They named the sack boy after money and then made very sure he never touched any. Here is what was happening above my head while I scrubbed. Today was the triennial root test. Every 3 years the Immortal Sect comes down out of the clouds and tests the children of the great families. And the ones with a spiritual root get to leave the mortal world and go become immortals, or at least go die trying somewhere more expensive. The whole manor was a beehive, carriages, silk. Young masters shouting for their good boots. Young misses weeping the pretty kind of weeping. Everyone in the Wang family who mattered was leaving for the sky, and everyone who didn't matter was staying to be swept up afterward. I want you to understand the exact shape of the injustice, because it's the shape of my whole childhood. I had served these people since I was 6. Since a winter when a merchant found a half-frozen brat wrapped in a rice sack outside the city and figured a starving child was cheaper than a dog and quieter. I carried their water. I told their daughters stories at night so they'd sleep. I ate what came back from the table with the bones already in it. And the reward for 7 years of that, the bonus at the end, was a standing order from the head steward. On the day the masters ascend, the gates close. And any servant who tries to slip out and chase the immortal life gets cut down at the wall. No mercy. Death for a broom that wants to be a person. So that was my morning, polishing the last stone of a house that had already decided I should die in it. And I was smiling. I couldn't help it, because there was a thing these people didn't know about their sack boy. And it was the best-kept secret in the province, and it lived behind my own eyes. I set down the rag. I glanced around the way you learn to glance when getting caught resting means a beating. Nobody, just me and the clean stone and the noise of a family flying away. I closed my eyes. And there it was, there it always was, a world, my world. Behind my eyelids, where a normal person has the dark and maybe a headache, I had a country. A green rolling country the size of a small county, with a forest on one edge and grassland running off past where I could see, and a river doing lazy loops through the middle of it. Wheat grew there. It grew by itself, tall and heavy and gold, in fields nobody had ever plowed. Rabbits lived in the grass, fat ones, thousands of them, more than any grassland had a right to feed. Chickens, ducks on the river, every one of them bigger than the ones they sold in the market, glossier, meaner about it. I reached out a hand that only existed in there, and I plucked a single grain of rice off a stalk. It was the size of the tip of my little finger. I bit it sweet, sweet like fruit, sweet like something that shouldn't grow in a field, the kind of sweet that a starving 6-year-old would have committed several crimes for. Spirit rice. A whole secret county of it growing in the back of a servant boy's skull. I'd had this since before I could remember. I used to think everybody had a green place behind their eyes and just didn't mention it, the way you don't mention your own heartbeat. Took me a few hungry years to understand that no, this was mine, this was a treasure. And if a single person in the Wang Manor ever found out about it, they would open my head like a melon to see how it worked. So I told nobody. For 7 years I knelt and scrubbed and bowed with an immortal's garden hidden in my head, waiting. Here's the math I did every single day of those 7 years. A world like this, that grows spirit rice and spirit beasts on its own forever, for free, with a thing like that, if I only had a spiritual root to cultivate with, how could I possibly fail to reach immortality? I had the richest cheat in the world. I was just missing 2 small items. 1, a spiritual root which you're born with or you're not. 2, a cultivation technique which the immortals keep locked up like the family silver. 2 items. That's all that stood between the sack boy and the sky. Anyway, I opened my eyes and the sky was busy being unavailable. And I still had a locked gate and a kill order to deal with first. That's when young Miss Zhao Meiling found me. I have to tell you about Zhao Meiling because she is the reason I am a person and not a stain on a wall somewhere. She was the eldest daughter, the one who found the frozen sack boy 7 years ago and told her father to keep him. She named me. She was the one child in that house who looked at the servants and saw servants, not furniture. When I told stories at night, I told the young misses all the tales I somehow half remembered from another life I didn't like to think about, 30 years east of the river, 30 years west, that kind of thing. She was the one who actually listened, chin on her hands, eyes going wide at the good parts. She came into the courtyard already dressed to leave, in traveling silk, with the whole weight of the day on her. And she pressed a small red sandalwood box into my hands and closed my fingers around it and said, "Don't open it until we're gone. Promise me?" And then she couldn't say anything else, so she left, just like that. A girl with a spiritual root off to become an immortal, taking 1 second on the worst best morning of her life to make sure the sack boy didn't get left with nothing. The carriages rolled. The family ascended. The head steward, a smiling old snake named Chen Wai, gave the order in his soft voice, "Close the gates. And remember the master's instruction, no one leaves the manor, otherwise death without mercy," and the great doors boomed shut and locked me in with the ghosts and the good silverware. I opened the box. Inside was a letter in Mailing's careful hand. And under the letter, 10,000 taels of silver in notes, a jade pendant carved like a phoenix, and a folded document with a red seal on it, my freedom paper. She had signed me out of the family. She'd made me a free man before she left, so that whatever happened, I would not die a slave. The letter said, more or less, "You are free now. Take the silver and go. Leave Jiayuan City and never come back, and let us never meet again, because if we meet again, it means one of us fell. And I'd rather imagine you happy and far away." Live Guangfu. I stood in that locked courtyard holding my freedom and 10,000 tales of a dead childhood. And I'll be honest with you, something in my chest did a thing it hadn't done in years. Then I put it away, because grief is a luxury for people who aren't currently under a kill order. I whistled, 2 notes low, and out of the gray morning sky dropped Zio Yun, my black falcon, my one friend with feathers, a bird I'd trained on scraps and secrets for 3 years. She hit my shoulder like she owned it. I pointed at the road the carriages had taken and told her, "Follow the eldest young miss, stay high, stay quiet, don't let anyone see you." She launched off my arm and was a black dot over the wall in 4 wing beats. I stripped off the servant gray and put on plain hemp, looked at the locked gate, the high wall, the smiling order to kill me, did the arithmetic one more time. Came into this house wrapped in a rice sack, going to leave it wrapped in hemp, a free man with a garden in my head and a whole locked estate between me and the road. Human or immortal, time to find out which. Now, a locked manor is a real problem for most servants, and it was no problem at all for me. And there's a reason for that, and the reason has a name too. Because for 7 years, the Wang family had one other thing they didn't know about their sack boy. I could fight. Not the pretty way. Not sword dance, courtyard drill, show your father way, the other way. Somewhere in the life before this one, I had hands that remembered violence. And in this life, I'd fed those hands quietly, in the dark, with a stolen manual and a lot of pain. Until I could read a man's footsteps through a wall and tell you how many he was and whether he was scared. I kept a long knife I wasn't supposed to own. I kept a fold of blue poison needles I definitely wasn't supposed to own. A servant who can vanish and a servant who can kill are 2 very different kinds of cheap, and only one of them lives to 13 in a house like this. I went over the manor like water finding a crack, through the kitchen court, along the wall shadow, quiet as a held breath. And in the secluded back garden where nobody was supposed to be, I ran straight into the last 3 people in the world I wanted to see. Head steward Chen Wai. And his 2 sons. Chen Wai was 50 and moved like a man half that. He and his boys were doing exactly what I was doing, running. There's a dog hole in the back wall the sons had been using for years. And the whole family was about to squeeze through it and go try their own luck at the sky, kill order or no kill order. Steward and sons, all 3 caught out here in the same crime as me. For a second, nobody breathed. Then Chen Wai smiled, he always smiled. It was the most dangerous thing about him, and came at me. Fast. Faster than a 50-year-old steward has any right to be, palm out, aimed at my chest, the kind of strike that ends a conversation. I got a forearm up and turned it, and it still threw me back 3, 4 steps, boots skidding on the garden stone. But here's the thing. His hand, the one that hit me, twitched when it landed, just a flicker. He tucked it back into his sleeve, real smooth, real casual, like nothing had happened. Something had happened. I'd hurt him. A servant boy's block had stung the old snake's palm, and now we both knew a thing about each other that neither of us had known this morning. We stood there in the wreck of the flower bed, doing math at each other. I let him see the poison needles first. Blue tips, held loose between my knuckles, the kind of blue that means the man they go into stops arguing forever. Then I mentioned in a friendly voice that his two sons were standing awfully close together, and that I'd never missed a throw in my life, and wouldn't it be a shame? Chen Y's smile got wider and somehow colder, and then he did the smartest thing a cornered snake can do. He decided we were friends. Suddenly he was a benevolent elder. Suddenly we were all just poor folk fleeing a cruel house. And shouldn't we look out for each other on the hard road ahead? And off you go, young Guangfu, mind how you go. I bowed. He bowed. Two people bowing to each other while each one calculates the other's funeral. I backed to the wall, went up 3 zhang of sheer stone like a lizard, sat on the top for one breath to make sure none of them produced a crossbow, and dropped down the far side into the free world. I want to flag something for you because it matters later. As I went over that wall, I was already sure of one fact. Chen Y did not believe I would reach the Immortal Sect alive. He knew something I didn't yet. The old snake was smiling because he'd already fed me to something. I found out what at a tea house. See, I'm a servant. Servants and information are the same substance. You learn young that the fastest way to know what your betters are planning is to become a piece of the furniture near them and stay very still. So before I ran for the road, I let myself get a bowl of tea in a crowded stall, and I did the thing I do best, which is sit there being no one and listening to everyone. And I got 2 educations at once. At the next table over, Chen Y, who doubled back, thinking himself far ahead of me, was murmuring to his sons. And the murmur was this: the family head, before he ascended, had left guards posted on the West Road. Their job was to catch and kill any servant who tried to flee toward the sect. Chen Y was going to walk out the front nice and legal. The crippled younger son would go out the dog hole, and the West Road, the road I was already pointed at, was a throat with knives in it. That was the funeral he'd fed me to. Very tidy. Say goodbye all polite, and let the master's guards do the wet part. The second education came from a table of young rich men, city sons, loudly deciding to skip the root test entirely. And what they said stuck to my ribs because it was the first honest description of my dream I'd ever heard. The Immortal Sect, one of them was lecturing, is a meat grinder. You think you go up there and drink dew and float? No. A handyman disciple, he said, lives worse than a manor servant lives down here. People die. His own uncle went up and got bitten in half by a Yao beast for the crime of collecting spirit grass. And even if you don't die, even if you claw your way to something called foundation establishment, where you get to live for centuries, fewer than 1 man in 100 ever makes it that far. I'd rather be a rich man's immortal down here, the boy said, draining his cup, than an immortal's dog up there. I sat with my cold tea and let that settle. Because he wasn't wrong. That was the trap of the whole thing, and I could see it clean even at 13. The sky wasn't freedom. The sky was just a bigger manor with a crueler steward and a longer list of ways to die. Everyone clawing to get up there was clawing to be a servant in a better house. Fine, good, I tucked it away. Never once in this life had I wanted to be a good servant in a better house. I wanted the other thing. The thing the rich boy hadn't mentioned because he'd never had a garden growing behind his eyes. I wanted to live, not 150 years of tenant labor. I wanted to not die, ever if the universe would sign for it. And the sky, for all its knives, was the only door that even claimed to open onto that. So the West Road it was, knives and all. I rode out of the city on a bought horse, following a black dot in the sky, past the last honest tableau of the mortal world. Vendors, beggars with the wrong number of limbs. A girl in the dust with a sign around her neck offering to sell herself for 20 taels to bury a father. 20 taels? I had 10,000 in my shirt and a country in my head, and I still couldn't fix that, not that morning, not without painting a target on my own back. And I made myself look at her anyway. Where you're born, you don't choose. What you do after that, you choose. I chose the road. The knives were waiting at a tea stall between 2 hills, exactly where Chen Y's information said they'd be. 8 of them, family guards, men I half knew, men who'd cuffed me for slow water when I was 9. They recognized the sack boy right off. They got real friendly about it, the ugly kind of friendly. Talked about giving me a good last meal. Promised it wouldn't hurt too much. One of them actually said that, it won't hurt too much, like he was doing me a kindness. 8 grown killers and 1 13-year-old with a knife and a fold of needles and a garden nobody could see. I did not draw the knife. I want to be clear about that, because it's the first real move of my whole story and it wasn't a punch. While they were savoring the moment, I crouched like a scared boy, which was not hard to fake. I was a scared boy, and I quietly worked 3 poison needles point up into the dirt where a man steps when he lunges. Then I stood up and I did the only thing that has ever reliably saved my life. I talked, not begging. I want that on the record. I have never once begged. I named them, said the first guard's wife's name and his son's and where they lived. Told them the second one's 80-year-old mother lived alone by the north gate. Reminded them the third had exactly 1 boy to carry his name, and wouldn't that be sad? Flat, friendly, like I was reading a shopping list. And then I said the sentence that changes a room. If I die on this road, I have already arranged for every one of your families to follow me down. I said, I'm a servant, gentlemen. Servants know how to reach the people you love. It's the only thing we're for. And then, before the fear could curdle into the kind of rage that gets a boy killed anyway, I gave them the exit. 1,000 taels of silver, right now, to let one worthless sackboy walk past. 1,000 taels is 10 years of a guard's pay. You could watch it happen on their faces. The leader, a man named Zhao Yang, did the whole arithmetic of his life in about 4 seconds, the master's order, versus his mother by the north gate, versus 10 years of silver in his hand today, and I watched the knife go out of his eyes. That's when the second convoy came around the hill, and my third near-death of the day turned into my first piece of true luck. It was the Duanmu family. The family of 100 virtues, the ones who run every clinic in the region, 5 carriages and 30 people, and a banner with their names snapping in the wind. And leaning out of the lead carriage, staring at me with her mouth open, was a girl I hadn't seen in years. Lin Zioru. Little Lin Zioru, who I'd told stories to back when the 2 families traded visits, who used to call me Guangfujij and demand to know what happened next. She was older now, bright as a struck coin, and she took one look at the 8 guards and the sack boy and the knives, and she went from delighted to furious in the space of one breath. The guard leader tried to wave her off, family business, young miss, nothing to see. And then a man got down from the Duanmu carriage. Middle-aged, black Taoist robe, calm as a closed door, third Uncle Lin Bo. He didn't shout. He looked at 8 armed men the way you'd look at 8 mosquitoes, and he said one word. Scram, they scrammed. Zhao Yang took my 1,000 taels and left so fast he nearly forgot his own sword, and honestly, good for him, he had a mother by the north gate. Then Lin Zioru did the thing that rearranged my life. She borrowed her uncle's spiritual root testing plate, a plain jade disc, and made me put my hand on it. Because she decided on the spot that her storyteller was coming with her to the sky, and that was that. I put my hand on the plate. It lit up. I'm going to underplay this because I always underplay this, but understand what that light was. That light was the second of my 2 missing items arriving. A spiritual root, the thing you're born with or you're not. Turns out the sackboy was born with one, and nobody had ever bothered to check because who tests a broom? I had the garden, now I had the root. I made my face do shock. That part was easy, because I was, in fact, shocked, just not at the light. I was shocked at how close I'd come to dying 8 different ways before lunch on the one day the universe finally decided to pay out. Lin Zioru hauled me into her carriage against every rule of propriety her family had, and we rolled for UU City. And I told myself the same sentence I'd been telling myself all morning, upgraded now. From here on, Zhao Meiling is not the only person who ever saved my life. I found out later, much later, that the carriage ride was another test I'd passed without knowing it. Uncle Lin Bo had spent the whole ride with his divine sense wrapped quietly around me, reading me, weighing me. And the thing he was listening for was hate. If the sackboy had spent that ride cursing the Wang family that used him, plotting revenge, dripping poison, Lin Bo had already decided he'd quietly kill me at the next bend and spare his niece a monster. I didn't curse them. I didn't hate Meiling, and I couldn't be bothered to hate the rest. And that not my root, not my knife, is the thing that let me live to the end of the day. 4th near-death of the day, dodged by not being bitter. Remember that. It comes up. Lin Zioru, meanwhile, was busy being 12 about it. She pressed her treasured purple bead bracelet into my hands, 100 flowers bead, she told me proudly, refined from 100 kinds of flower and a piece of soul-nurturing wood, good for cultivation, very rare, very hers. She'd once tried to trade this exact bracelet to Meiling to buy me off her years ago and been refused. Now she just gave it to me. I tried to give it back. She threatened to cry. I kept the bracelet. That bracelet, by the way, is going to save me a completely different way in about 2 years, and not because of the flowers. Remember it, we reached UU City, and UU City reset my whole idea of the word city. 20,000 lie from home, and it went on forever. Spirit fields to the horizon, that same fat gold grain I grew in my head. Except out here it was farmland, ordinary, a thing people just did. Flying boats overhead, actual boats in the actual sky, 2, 3, 500 people standing on them like it was a ferry. 10 million souls, immortals and mortals mixed together in the same streets. And land you couldn't buy with silver anymore because past a certain point, the only money that meant anything was spirit stones. I stood in the road and looked up at boats full of people crossing the sky, and I did not gawk. Because a gawking servant gets his purse cut, but inside I was reorganizing everything. This was the shape of the ladder I was about to climb, and every rung of it I now understood was going to cost spirit stones, and I had 10,000 taels of silver that were, up here, worth exactly 1 spirit stone. Good thing I had a garden. Lin Zioru's family, it turned out, were not small. Her people held a whole peak in the Manhwa sect, Beiyao Peak, the medicine peak, and her family's old ancestor was a golden core cultivator, which is a tier of person who can flatten a city if he's in a mood. She kept telling me to just say her name if anyone gave me trouble, and she'd protect me. She meant it too, which was sweet, and which I quietly said under the things I will never, ever do. Because the fastest way to become somebody's dog is to hide behind them the first time it rains. Before we reached the test, Zio Yun came back out of the sky and dropped onto my arm with a letter tied to her leg. It was from Mei Ling. Mei Ling's family had caught my falcon and worked out that I'd fled the manor, which meant they'd worked out that I'd survived Chen Wai. Which meant the family head, Chen Feng, was now doing a very rapid recalculation of his feelings about me. The letter said, in effect, "Don't run from us, come find us in Yuyu. We mean you no harm, meet at the Dafu Gui restaurant. No one is allowed to draw a weapon inside its walls, you'll be safe. I'll spare you the family politics, but here's the short version because it's funny. 6 months before all this, Mei Ling's fierce little sister Zhao Manhua had broken the leg of Chen Wai's crippled son in a fight. Feng, the family head, had wanted to just wipe out Chen Wai's whole line over it. That's the kind of house it was. But a wandering geomancer had warned him that a dragon was about to rise from the abyss. A person of enormous luck was about to emerge nearby. And that if Feng spilled unjust blood in the next half-year, the karma would eat his family alive. So Feng had waited. Half a year. To the day. And the day the half-year ended was the day I escaped. And Feng, adding it up, realized 2 things at once. 1, the geomancer had almost certainly been hired by Chen Wai to buy exactly this time, which meant the old snake had out-schemed him and was now loose in the world with a grudge. And 2, and this is my favorite part, the dragon rising from the abyss, the person of enormous luck, might very well be the sack boy who just walked out of his house with a spiritual root nobody knew about. So when I walked into the Dafu Gui restaurant, the man who 6 months ago would have had me buried without a name stood up, and beamed and called me Brother Guangfu, and told his own children to treat me as an elder brother. Cool. Very cool. Love that for me. I smiled back and called him Uncle Wang and let him buy me dinner because I am not too proud to eat a rich man's food while he's terrified of me. And because Zhao Meiling was sitting right there watching her father flatter the boy he'd tried to have killed, and she caught my eye and we had an entire silent conversation that went, "He's lying." "I know. He's always lying. I know that too. Are you okay?" I'm free and I'm fed and I'm sitting down, which is 3 more things than I had this morning. 3 days later, the great test. I'd love to tell you the test was a big dramatic thing, but it was mostly a very long line. Millions of people streaming up a mountain the immortals had leveled flat on top, the immortal ascension platform, to put their hand on a disc and find out whether their whole life was about to change or stay exactly as boring as it was. Maybe 1 person in 100 in Yuyu has a root, and those are the descendants of cultivators, so the odds thin out fast. 100 tables. White-robed sect cultivators working the discs with the enthusiasm of clerks. For most people, the whole ceremony was 1 word. Next. Lin Zioru went first and lit the disc up like a festival. Fire and wood, dual attribute, high grade. The kind of root that has golden core cultivators sending their servants over before the glows even faded. A golden core elder actually did appear, instantly, wanting her as a personal disciple, and got politely walled off by her family, and left her a white jade pendant as a consolation gift that could tank 1 full power strike from a foundation cultivator and buy her 15 minutes to run. That was the party favor. 15 minutes of not dying handed over like a sweet. Mailing tested water, medium grade, outer sect. Her sister manhwa tested fire, medium grade, outer sect. Solid, ordinary, alive, then me. I put my hand on the disc and it read 5 elements, all 5. Medium grade, medium tier. Now a 5 elements root sounds impressive and mostly isn't, spread across all 5, it's average, a jack of every element and master of none. And the clerk barely looked up. Outer sect. Next. And that was exactly, precisely what I wanted. An average root draws no golden core elders. An average root gets you a bunk and a work assignment and left alone. I did not want to be the shining prodigy everyone watches. I had a garden to hide. The best root for a man with a secret is a forgettable one. I got my forgettable root and I stepped out of line content. And then 2 people 3 tables down started whooping and my good mood curdled. Chen Y's sons, both of them. Wang Yufu and the crippled younger one, Wang Yaoyan, the boy whose leg manhwa had broken. Both of them had just lit up discs. Both of them had spiritual roots. "We've defied fate," the crippled one was howling, and he turned his head and found me in the crowd. And the look he gave me was not a boy who'd forgotten anything. So, the old snake was loose in the world. And now the old snake's sons were going up the same mountain I was, with the same root I had, carrying 6 months of fresh hate and a broken leg's worth of interest on it. Manhwa went pale next to me. I didn't. I just noted it and wrote on. Some debts you pay. Some debts you let compound quietly until the day you can pay them all at once, in full, with witnesses. I'd learned that watching Chen Y. I was a very good student. The road up the mountain, it turned out, was lined with recruiters, the lesser families that feed off the sect, shouting offers at the fresh spirit-root children like fishmongers. 3 spirit stones a month if you join the Ma family. 50 stones for every spirit-root baby you produce, said another, and free concubines thrown in, which, no. The New family waving a talisman legacy, the Lu family waving alchemy, and 1 tower recruiting female dual cultivators, which I'll get to, and which I hate so later. Lin Bo walked me through the whole ugly buffet in his flat, calm voice. The sect proper, Wanfa, has the best legacies but grinds you to paste. The son-in-law families drain your essence dry so you'll never reach foundation, but you eat well while they do it. The labor families work you 50 years cheap. And every single option, every last one, was the same deal I'd already turned down once today. Give me your 1 life and I'll tell you it's a gift. I listened to all of it, nodded politely, and joined the sect as a plain outer disciple. No family, no patron, no dual cultivation tower, no 50-year contract. Just a bunk and a forgettable root and a garden nobody could see. Before we went up, Zhao Meiling told me to change my name. There were, she pointed out, roughly 4,000 Guangfu streaming up this mountain, all named after money by people who'd never let them have any. And a man who wants to be remembered should not share a name with every broom in the province. She was right, and I'd been waiting 7 years to put that servant name down. I picked Chen Lai. It was my name, the one from before, from the life I don't talk about, the one my hands remembered violence from. Yang, as in the sun. I looked at Meiling when I said it, and I told her, "I'm the sun, you're the moon," which was a bold thing to say to the daughter of the house that used to own me. But it had been a very long day, and I was a free man now, and she didn't tell me to stop. Chen Lai, remember it. Everyone in this story is about to. The last gate into the sect was called the Heart Questioning Hall, which is exactly as pleasant as it sounds. You stand in front of a truth talisman, and they ask you where you came from, why you're here. And whether you mean the sect harm, and the talisman glows if you lie. I told the truth on all 3 because I'd arranged my truths carefully in advance. I was here to cultivate, I meant the sect no harm. And I very sincerely did not, the sect having done nothing to me yet. Intent is a slippery thing. I walked through clean. They handed me my new life in a small pile. 2 gray robes, a handbook, a storage pouch, 20 spirit stones, a bottle of starter pills. And 1 cultivation technique, the Tao source scripture, a plain attribute-less Kai refinement method, the sect's cheapest. There it was. Item 2, my second missing piece, handed over in a bundle with a spare robe. Garden, root, technique. For the first time in my life, the sack boy had the complete set. And then on the flying boat out to the outer sect's mountain, the universe handed me a 4th thing I hadn't even known to want. There was an old man on the boat. White hair, gray robe, and completely, screamingly insane. He kept shrieking that he'd done it. He'd reached foundation establishment. He was going to live for centuries, and he had not, and he was not. What he'd done was cultivate himself straight off a cliff. Chi deviation, they call it. He'd wanted it too hard for too long, and his own energy had turned around and eaten his mind. And now his heart meridian was broken and there was no one home behind his eyes. A finished man still walking. Everyone on the boat gave him a wide, nervous berth, everyone except me. Because I'm a servant, and a servant knows that the way you survive a powerful lunatic is not to avoid him. It's to make him feel like the most important man in the room. So I stepped up, and I bowed low, and I called him Uncle Master. And I congratulated him with tears practically in my eyes on his glorious ascension to foundation establishment. The dying old man lit up like a temple. Somebody had finally believed him. And in his joy he turned his storage pouch inside out over the deck and scattered everything he owned to us newbies, laughing, a celestial maiden strewing flowers, giving away a lifetime of accumulation because the sack boy told him he'd won. I caught a booklet out of the air, just a thin, plain, hand-copied booklet. On the cover it said, Talisman-making experience. Then the law enforcement cultivators arrived to deal with the lunatic, and their leader's eyes swept the deck, swept the scattered loot. And stopped for just 1/2 second too long, on the booklet in my hand. Then he moved on and let us keep our spoils, and had the old man's body sealed in a coffin to be carted off to the Yin corpse cave and raised as a corpse laborer. Because up here a man is a worker while he's alive and cultivation material after, and nobody wastes either. I didn't know yet what I was holding. But I clocked that stare. When a law enforcement officer's gaze snags on the cheapest-looking thing a lunatic threw away, the cheapest-looking thing is not cheap. Let me tell you what it was, since I'll spare you the 2 weeks it took me to figure it out. In the cultivation world, they have a saying, formulas are easy, legacy is hard. Anyone can buy the recipe for a talisman. What you can't buy is the 10,000 tiny things the master knows in his hands, how hard to press, when to breathe. Which stroke ruins the whole sheet if you rush it. That knowledge is a legacy, and legacy is the wall that separates the man who lives from the man who dies, the Chi refiner from the foundation cultivator. A talisman that flies 30% faster is the whole distance between escaping an ambush and being buried in one. The booklet in my hand was a real legacy. A complete, patient, hand-holding, talisman-making legacy, every stroke explained, the kind of thing families kill to keep and would never, ever let a nameless outer disciple read. The mad elder had used it to earn his pill money for decades. And a boat full of connected sect kids had all watched a sackboy catch it, which meant they were all going to come and take it from me. Fine. I deal with that. Everything up here was the same problem as the manor, just with better clothes. Someone stronger wants the thing you have, and you have to keep it without dying. I'd been solving that exact problem since I was 6. They put me on Kingyun Peak, the outer sect's home, 1 free year of cultivation, no missions, stone rooms worse than the servant quarters I'd left. And they put me in a courtyard with about 15 others, and I did the thing I do, which is stand quietly in the corner and sort every single one of them into a mental drawer. There was Zhu heaping, righteous and loud, the kind who will die for a principle and take you with him. Pretty Yang Yufeng, from Jinque Mountain, who I clocked in about 4 seconds as a girl carrying a knife behind her smile. Shifty He Ming, who leered at the women in a way that told me exactly how he'd behaved the first time he thought no one was watching. Then Zhu Cheng, 3 generations of outer disciple in his blood and very proud of it, the way you're proud of a thing precisely because it isn't much. Big honest Guo Lihua, a tenant farmer's son built like a door. There was round-faced Y Lily, a merchant girl from the Wanbao Pavilion, already sizing up who'd be a good customer, and I could tell she'd sized me as a mystery. And off in the corner, alone, not talking to anyone, sat a cold, arrogant young man named Lei Tian. I looked at Lei Tian for a while. Some people just have it, that gravity. That sense that the story thinks they're the main character. He sat alone because he'd already decided the rest of us were scenery. And something in the way he did it told me he had a real backing, a real opportunity, something in his pocket the size of a destiny. I didn't envy him, I just made a note. In my experience, the people the story loves are the people the story eventually needs to kill, and it's very useful to know early who those are. Remember Lei Tian too. He and I have a long way to go together, he just doesn't know it yet. That first night, an old gray-robed disciple named Song Heiyu, a man 1 year from retiring back to the mortal world, threw us newcomers a farewell dinner, and offered to answer any question we had about the sect. And over that dinner, drunk and generous and finally free to say it, the old man told us the truth about the beautiful mountain we'd all just sold our lives to climb. Of the 15 young people who'd shared Song Haeyu's courtyard 70 years ago, he told us, 8 were dead. 6 had given up and gone home to grow old. 2 had reached the inner sect. Both of those 2 had then tried for foundation establishment, and both had failed, and failing at foundation mostly means dying. 15 bright, hopeful kids, and the final score after 70 years was, everybody either dead, quit, or dead. Then he laid out the machine for us, number by number. And I want you to hear the numbers because the numbers are the whole trap. Foundation establishment, the tier that lets you live for centuries instead of a century and a half, requires a foundation pill. A foundation pill costs 5,000 spirit stones if you can even find one for sale. The sect produces about 200 of them per decade, 200, for a sect of tens of thousands. And of the people who eat one, only about 3 in 10 actually succeed. So call it 60 new foundation cultivators every 10 years, and 70% of those pills are spoken for before they are even cooled, promised to the children of the 9 great families, the founding bloodlines who actually own the mountain we were all farming. An outer disciple's official allowance is 20 spirit stones a year. A foundation pill is 5,000. Do that division. That's 250 years of saving every stone and eating air for one pill that you're not allowed to buy that wouldn't be for sale anyway. That is the answer to the question everyone whispers up here. There is no way out for outer disciples. That's not a mood. It's arithmetic. The system is a funnel with the bottom welded shut. And every one of us was a grain of sand cheerfully pouring ourselves in, believing we'd be the one who found the crack. Zhu Heaping got drunk and furious about it, how the sect hoards its pills, how it wastes them on dull-rooted family brats while real talent starves, how the whole thing was rotten and would fall. He wasn't wrong. He was just loud in a place where being right and loud gets you the same funeral as being wrong. Old Song shut the dinner down before the talk got anyone killed, and I sat there in the corner with my cheap plum wine listening to the machine explained. And I did something none of the others did. I smiled, because they were all hearing a death sentence. And I was hearing a market. Every number the old man read out was a wall to them and a price to me. The sect couldn't fund its own talents, fine. That meant talent was for sale to whoever had resources. Resources meant spirit stones. Spirit stones came from spirit rice, spirit beasts, spirit materials, the exact things that grew for free forever in a green country behind my eyes that not one soul in this sect knew existed. The whole immortal world ran on resources. And I was the one man in it who had an infinite mine and no way to explain where it came from. That last part was the only real problem. And that night, walking the drunk Wang sisters home, I started solving it. I dragged Mayhew into my room and I gave her a talking to she didn't enjoy. Because on the walk back she'd snubbed Shifty He-Ming in front of people, called him a toad reaching for swan meat, which accurate, but out loud day one. And I sat her down and I told her the things she needed to survive up here. This isn't Jiayuan City, I said. Down there your father's name was law. Up here there is no law but strength, and you have none yet, and neither do I. Up here words become sentences. A loose mouth doesn't just embarrass you, it gets the whole Wang group buried quietly by someone who never has to answer for it. You understand? You are an ant here now. You are exactly what the crippled Yaoyan was to you 6 months ago. So you will smile, and you will bow, and you will be no one until the day you're strong enough to be someone. And on that day you still won't gloat, because gloating is what weak people do with strength they are about to lose. She went white, and then she went quiet, and then, I think, she grew up a little, right there in the chair. Good. I only bothered because Mei-Ling loved her and because I'd decided the Wang sisters were mine to keep alive. A man building a house needs walls he can trust at his back, and there aren't many of those in a place like this. Then I turned to the real work, the booklet, the legacy. A dozen people had watched me catch it, and a law enforcement officer had noticed it, which meant the shakedown was coming. Someone bigger would arrive, all polite, and offer to take the priceless thing off the poor commoner's hands for a token sum. I couldn't refuse, not yet. Refusing a stronger man's generosity is how weak men die making a point. So I wouldn't refuse. I'd give it up freely, cheerfully to whoever came. And they'd walk away thinking they'd fleeced a rube. But first, the sisters were going to copy it. Every stroke, every note, the whole thing by hand in 1 month behind a sealed cultivation door, because there's one law up here even the 9 families respect. You do not break the seal on a disciple in closed cultivation. Do it and it's death, no appeal. It's the one wall in the whole sect that even the strong won't climb. So while I smiled and stalled and got ready to hand a priceless legacy to the first bully who asked for it, behind a sealed door 2 girls would be quietly turning it into something the bully could never take back. Knowledge in 3 heads instead of 1 on paper he'd never see. That was the shape of me from the very start. Give them the thing. Keep the thing. Let them think they won. Get exactly what I came for. I've never won a single game of chess in my life, by the way. Terrible at it. Lose to children. So a long time ago, I stopped trying to play the pieces well and started setting the board instead. It's a lot easier to win when you own the table. The sisters sealed the door and started copying. And the very next knock, right on schedule, was the shakedown walking in the front gate. His name was Gao Fan. Inner sect disciple, white robe, of the Gao family, the family that runs the mission hall. Which is to say the family that decides which jobs pay and which jobs kill you, which makes them roughly the most useful people in an outer disciple's life to not anger. He came with 4 others and a very warm smile. The mad elder, he explained gently, had descendants who wanted the family's talisman legacy back. Out of pure kindness, Gao was prepared to offer me 100 spirit stones in compensation for my trouble in returning it. 100 stones is 5 years of my official allowance, dangled like I should weep with gratitude. I did weep with gratitude. I was extremely good at it. I said, "Oh, senior brother, it was never mine. I could never take money for returning what isn't mine. Please, let me just go and fetch it right now." And I walked over and knocked on the sealed door where the sisters were copying. They didn't answer. Of course they didn't answer. They were in closed cultivation. No one may disturb a disciple in closed cultivation. I knocked again, apologetic, helpless. "My sisters have the booklet in there for safekeeping, senior brother, and they've sealed the door for cultivation. And well, you know the rule better than I do." And I watched Gao Fan run the exact calculation I'd built the whole trap out of. He swept me with his divine sense first. Confirmed I hadn't even cultivated a wisp of Kai yet, couldn't so much as open a storage pouch, definitely didn't have the booklet on me. So it was behind the sealed door. And to get behind that door, he'd need law enforcement and a Golden Corps sign-off. And a formal charge of a major offense over 1 low-rank talisman legacy. And at the end of all that paperwork, he'd have made a permanent, scheming, patient enemy out of a nobody who clearly held a grudge like a hobby. Not worth it. Nowhere close to worth it. "I'll collect it in a month when your sisters emerge," he said, smooth as oil, and smiled and left. And oh, by the way, he added on the way out, he was the manager of the mission hall, and he'd be briefing us on our work assignments in a month too. Which was Gao's way of reminding me that he held my future missions in his hand, and that it would be very wise of me to be reasonable in 30 days. He walked out thinking he'd been magnanimous. He'd just given me the exact month I needed. I found out later he told his greedy little lackey that if the commoner had copied it, the lackey was welcome to go shake me down again privately and keep the thing for 500 stones, Gao himself washing his hands, too big to bother, leaving the scraps for a smaller dog. Fine by me. Small dogs I can handle. And here's the part that made the whole thing worth it. Old Song Hey, you saw how I'd handled Gao. So did Yang Yufeng. So did Y Lily. And all 3 of them recalculated me on the spot, from nameless commoner with a lucky root to someone to keep an eye on. Which is exactly the reputation I wanted, interesting but not shiny. A man worth being friends with, not a treasure worth cracking open. The month the sisters spent copying, I spent doing 2 things. First, I finally cultivated Kai. Took me 10 days medium root. It's supposed to take between 10 and 30, so average, forgettable, perfect. I sat and breathed and drew the world's spiritual Kai into my body the way the Tao source scripture described. And for 9 days all I got was sleepy and starving, so I ate my own secret spirit rice and slept. On the 10th day something clicked, and a thread of Kai came into me and stayed, and I was Kai refining level 1. My eyes got sharper. My body got lighter. The world got a half shade brighter. I was officially a cultivator. Second, and this is the one that mattered, with that first thread of Kai, I could finally look properly at my own garden. Turns out the green country behind my eyes had a shape I'd never been able to see before. It was a bead, a small irregular black bead sitting in my sea of consciousness. And inside it, folded up impossibly, was the whole world thousands of li across, full of gentle spiritual kai. Not dense, not richer than the sect's own mountains, but mine and self-sustaining, and I discovered, testing carefully, mine to command. With my divine sense inside the bead, I could reach out and kill a rabbit by thinking about it. I could raise a hill out of flat ground by wanting it, though that one made me faint from the strain. I could reshape the land. I was not a farmer in there. I was a small, clumsy god. And I had a rabbit problem. The rabbits in my space had been breeding unchecked for years, a plague of them eating my spirit rice down to stubble. Annoying. Except I noticed something. A rare few of the rabbits, the ones that gorged on the sweetest spirit rice generation after generation, had changed. They'd gotten faster, leaner, meaner, and when they ran, they left a little curl of wind behind them. Swift wind rabbits. Bloodline awakened. The exact hide-end blood used to make wind travel talismans. I stood in my garden looking at a plague of pests that had quietly turned themselves into the single most useful talisman material in the region, breeding for free, forever, faster than I could ever use them. And I started laughing alone in a stone room on Kingyun Peak. Because that was it. That was the crack in the whole rigged thing. I didn't need the sex pills or the sex missions or the sex permission. I had a bottomless mine of talisman material, and thanks to a dead lunatic, the priceless legacy that told me how to turn it into money. All I needed now was a face to sell it behind, a reason for the wealth that wasn't, there's a world in my skull. When the sisters came out of seclusion with a perfect copy in hand, I already had the whole plan built. The original I'd hand to Gao Fan's people with a grateful bow, as promised. The copy I'd sell, quietly once for a fortune, to exactly the right person. And that person walked up to me at dinner 3 days later with a business smile and a purse the size of my head. Why Lily bought the copy for 500 spirit stones. Let me put that number in context. The annual allowance is 20. 90% of outer disciples have never held 300 stones at once in their lives. 500 from a courtyard mate for a hand-copied booklet. She practically threw a foundation cultivator's monthly income at me across a dinner table. And threw in a free bloodline pill and 20 wind travel talismans on top, and asked, please, could she also get her hands on the Wanbao Pavilion's auction catalogs for me so I could learn what things actually cost. That last part was the real gift, because why Lily wasn't buying a booklet. She was buying a relationship with a man she'd correctly guessed was going somewhere. Merchants can smell it, and I let her because I needed exactly one thing to make my whole plan work. And it wasn't money, I had a garden full of money. It was a channel, a person embedded in the sex markets who could turn my strange free wealth into ordinary-looking stones without anyone asking where it came from. Here is the doctrine I built my whole rise on. And I'll say it once so I never have to bore you with it again. I have a bottomless mine, and a bottomless mine is only a target. The moment anyone believes my wealth is real and unexplained, a golden core cuts me open to find the source. So every stone I ever earn must have a boring, visible, believable reason to exist. Talisman income. A family business, a rich ancestor, anything but the truth. My whole life from here is one long magic trick, and the trick is making a miracle look like bookkeeping. So I gave myself a cover story and started laying the pipes. Cover story number 1, a rich dead ancestor. When anyone asked how a nobody afforded pills, I'd sigh and admit the Wang ancestor left me a few hundred stones. Small enough to explain a head start, small enough that no one goes looking for a mountain behind it. And it happened to be half true. The Wang family's founder, it turned out, had been a robber cultivator, a bandit of the immortal roads who'd murdered his way to a small fortune over 140 years. And Chen Feng had quietly handed his 3 children the loot in storage pouches. Mei Ling pressed her whole share on me, 500 stones, and insisted fiercely that I take it and reach foundation first before her, before anyone. I want you to hold on to that. A girl handing a former servant her entire inheritance and demanding he outrun her with it. That's not a plot point. That's the warm thing at the center of this whole cold story. And every time it comes back, I'm going to make you feel it, because it's the only part of me the schemes never touched. Cover story number 2, the big one, the talisman-genius. This was the masterpiece. I would become known publicly, loudly, as a freakish natural talent at making wind travel talismans, so that when spirit rice and swift wind rabbits and spirit stones started flowing out of me in impossible quantities, Everyone would nod and say, "Ah, the talisman boy, of course, he's gifted." And no one would ever look for the world in my head. There was exactly one problem with becoming a famous talisman genius. I was terrible at making talismans. I mean genuinely, historically bad. I bought 300 blank talisman sheets and I ruined nearly all of them. My hand shook, my kai leaked at the wrong stroke, the ink spat. The Wang sisters, drawing beside me, both outdrew me easily, which they found hilarious and I found character building. The great talisman-genius, unable to finish one clean wind-travel talisman, surrounded by a snowdrift of his own wasted paper. And then I took the whole mess into my garden, and the garden fixed it, the way the garden fixes everything. Because inside the space, three things happened at once. My divine sense sharpened until I could see every flaw in a stroke before the ink dried. I could draw using the space's own ambient spiritual kai instead of burning my own. Which meant I could practice forever without exhausting myself. Infinite paper, infinite kai, infinite tries. And with my spiritual eye, I could watch the kai flow through a rabbit's body and simply learn how the wind travel effect wanted to be shaped from the source. 10 days in the garden and I walked out an actual talisman genius. The cover was no longer a lie. It was just powered by a secret. That, it turns out, is the best kind of cover there is, the kind that's true on the surface all the way down. And only false at the very bottom where no one can reach. Mei-ling watched me fail in public and succeed in private and knew exactly what had happened. She could read my face like a market sign by then, and she never said a word. She just started covering for me out loud, praising the genius, selling the story better than I could. A wall at my back I could trust. I told you they were worth keeping. Now the money engine wanted a bigger body than 3 people in a stone room, so I built one. The body I built was a family. Down in Yu City, Chen Feng, the family head who used to own me, now a mortal watching his children walk the immortal road without him, was exactly the tool I needed and smart enough to know it. He had no root, but he had something rarer up here than a root. He could run people. He could count and organize and keep 100 servants fed and moving in one direction, so I made him an offer. And the man who'd tried to have me killed at the start of the year became the mortal patriarch of my hidden empire by the end of it. The plan was simple and it was beautiful. The Wang family would open shops in Yu Spiritri cellars first, then more. The goods would come from my garden, free, endless, but to the world they'd look like the honest output of an honest business. Every caddy of sweet rice I sold gave a stone in my pocket a birth certificate. Rent a shop, then a warehouse, then a whole manor. Hire rootless cultivators to guard it. Test the servants' children for roots to grow real Wang cultivators. And slowly, quietly, under the cover of commerce, build a personal power structure with me invisible at the top of it. I sold about 1,000 stones worth of cave rice into Yu's grain shops in the first stretch. And rented a shop and the machine started turning. Xingyao, one of Feng's sons, a low-root boy with no future on the mountain and a real gift for logistics, ran the restocks. The cover business was alive. I'll be honest about one thing because I promised myself I'd be honest with you even when I don't come off well. When Xingyao, eager to please, brought me a gift of 8 girls from back home to be my concubines, servant girls I'd known as a child, girls with no roots and no futures that anyone had bothered to plan, I told him no. All 8 no. Not because I was a saint. Because a girl with no root is no use to a man building a faction. And because I'd been a piece of property myself once and I found I couldn't do the thing to someone else that had been done to me. So I did the only decent thing available. I ordered them taken in, fed, housed, employed, and left alone. Not gifts. Staff. People. It's a low bar. I'm aware it's a low bar. Up here it made me a radical. Meanwhile, back on the mountain, the first real enemy came to test me. And I want to tell you about him because he's the moment I stopped being a boy who dodges and became a man who marks. His name was Xinghu. He was the gray-robed guide who'd let us newbies in on that first day, the one who'd pointed me out to Gao Fan as the boy with the booklet. Now he came around personally to borrow my talisman legacy for 100 stones. And when I said it was already gone, handed back to Gao, he did the thing the strong do to the weak up here. He leaned on me. Let his spiritual pressure roll out, that invisible weight a higher cultivator can press down on a lower one until the lower one's knees want to fold. And he watched to see if mine would. They didn't. I stood there under a stronger man's pressure, and I told him flatly, "It's gone, go find Gao," and I smiled while I said it. He left angry. And I did something I'd never let myself do at the manor, because at the manor it would have been suicide. I didn't just file Xinghu away. I marked him. I put his name on a very short, very private list, the list of people I intend to find again someday outside the sect, where the no-fighting rules don't reach and settle with. Not today. Today I was Kai refining level 4, and he was stronger, and it wasn't time. But the list existed now, and Xinghu was the first name on it, and knowing that changed something in how I walked. At the manor I survived by having no enemies I couldn't smile at. Up here I was going to survive by having enemies I'd already scheduled. Because that's the other half of the doctrine. And it's the half that's easy to forget when you're busy being clever. I don't just want to live. Anyone can hide and live small. I want the other thing, the greedy thing, the thing I've wanted since I was a starving 6-year-old with a garden he couldn't eat. I want to live forever, and I want to do it on my feet. And up here the difference between living small and living forever is written entirely in strength, so I don't get to only defend. Every stone I bank, every rabbit I breed, every name I mark, it's all pointed at the same far-away thing. Enough power that no Xinghu, no Gao, no golden core, no funnel with the bottom welded shut ever gets to decide the length of my life for me. Weakness is the original sin up here. I'd known that since the manor wall. Now I finally had the means to stop being weak, and I did not intend to waste a single day of it. I reached Kai refining level 4 in under a year, which for a medium root is a scandal. Which is exactly why I'd built the talisman-genius cover to eat the scandal. Level 4 matters more than any level before it, because level 4 is when your divine sense extends outside your body, 40 zhang of it in my case. Which is roughly double what it should have been, another thing I kept quiet. Divine sense is the real beginning. With it you can fly a sword, curve a spell in the air, sign a contract with a beast. And my favorite, draw a talisman worth selling. Level 4 is where a cultivator stops being a person with a nice trick and becomes a weapon. And the very first thing I did with mine was hatch an army. Before the army could be an army, I had to learn to fight with more than a knife and a garden. And the learning happened in 2 places, a library and my own head. The library was the scripture pavilion on Wan Huan Peak, and it rearranged my idea of what a spell even was. Up here, spells don't live in dusty books. They live in jade slips, little tablets you press to your forehead. And a master's whole hand-holding demonstration unfolds inside your skull in 3 dimensions, every gesture, every breath once, and then the slip is spent. I bought the full set, and I bought the expensive improved versions of each, because I've never once regretted paying for the better tool. A movement spell to ride the wind. Fireball, real fireball, not the sputtering thing I'd embarrassed myself with. Golden needle for pests, cloud rain, a mana shield, entanglement, earth wall, and earth spikes. 1 for each of my 5 elements. Because a 5 elements root that only ever spends 1 element is a waste of the only interesting thing about my root. Zhu Heaping raged at the prices, and he wasn't wrong to. A full spell set cost him 5 years of allowance. And cost Y Lily with her family money a shrug. That was the day the wealth gap stopped being an abstraction in the courtyard and became a wound. You could watch it split the room. The backed and the poor, the shrug and the 5 years, sitting at the same table pretending it wasn't there. I sat in the middle of it with a garden that made the whole question meaningless and said nothing. Because a man who isn't visibly rich and isn't visibly poor is a man nobody's doing arithmetic about, and invisible is the only wealth that's safe up here. The second place I learned to fight was inside my own space. And it turned out to be the best training ground in the world, because it cheated as hard as I did. Inside the garden, my spiritual eye could see straight into a beast, the full flow of its kai and blood, the exact machinery of how it did the impossible thing it did. Which meant that when I fought my own rabbit plague to practice, I wasn't just throwing spells. I was reading the swift wind rabbits from the inside and learning the wind-riding trick from the source, cleaner than any jade slip could teach it. I could learn a beast's innate divine ability just by catching it and watching it work. I could improve a spell or invent one by seeing why the old version was clumsy. My garden wasn't only a mine and a farm. It was a school where the textbooks were alive and I could open them up and look at the answers. And it's where I gave Zio Yun her first real power, and where I first said out loud the thing that turned out to be the creed under everything. I fed her the bloodline pill, the one Y Lily had thrown in for free. And I want to be honest that it nearly killed her. A bloodline pill doesn't gift you power. It wakes up the sleeping thing in your blood and makes you survive the waking. And for a falcon with a poor bloodline, the waking was agony. She shed feathers. She bled. She screamed the small, terrible scream of an animal being remade against its will, and I sat with her through all of it. Because I'd asked her to climb higher than her blood wanted to go, and the least I could do was not look away while she did it. She lived. She came out the other side a spirit beast, weak as a newborn but real, and I fed her my cave rabbits until the strength came. And somewhere in the middle of that long night, I told her the thing I'd never told a person. We were born the same, you and I said. Wrapped in a sack, hiding under a wing, born like ants with the ambition of a swan. Nobody up here is supposed to climb out of the blood they were handed. We're going to climb out anyway, and if it hurts like this the whole way, well, it's supposed to. That's how you know you're still going up. A falcon can't answer. But she looked at me, and I looked at her, and that was the first brick of the thing I built my whole cold self around. A very short list of people and beasts who decided to climb with me, and for whom the cold thing would always keep one warm room. Then I put my color back in my cheeks and went out to keep buying my way toward forever, one spell and one rabbit and one scheme at a time. The army started as 8 bugs in a rock. Chen Feng had given me the Wang ancestors' other treasure, back at the start, a lump of orange amber with 8 tiny things suspended in it. They were eggs. 1,000-legged centipede eggs, an ancient bloodline, still alive after 100 years in the amber because the ancestor had never been rich enough to hatch them. 1,000-legged centipedes are born with earth escape in their blood. They swim through solid ground like it's water, and they can grow, given enough food, to the size of a mountain. The reason nobody hatches them is that enough food means a fortune in spirit beasts, endlessly forever. Which is a real problem for a normal cultivator, and no problem at all for a man who grows infinite spirit beasts in his head. Why Lily got me the fossil water to dissolve the amber and the culture solution to wake the eggs. I contracted my falcon Zio Yun first, a clean, deep bond, master and beast, the two of us already 3 years thick with trust. Then over 8 patient days, I woke and bound all 8 centipedes. 7 came out ordinary and terrible. The 8th came out gold, little gold. Bigger than his siblings, meaner, his carapace already hard enough to turn a blade, his earth escape already the sharpest of the lot. He looked up at me with a bug's flat eyes, and I felt, absurdly, the way I imagine a father is supposed to feel if the father's son is a golden-armored centipede who wants to eat everything that isn't me. I dropped all 9 of them, falcon and centipedes, into my garden where an infinite plague of swift-winged rabbits was waiting to be eaten. And I let nature do the rest. They ate. They grew, they got fast and coordinated, and when I sparred them all at once, absolutely humiliating, Zio Yun raining wind blades from above while 8 centipedes erupted out of the ground under my feet. I lost that fight. Badly. To my own pets. And I walked out of it delighted because it taught me the truest lesson about combat up here. It is not about power. It is about speed and ambush and never ever fighting fair. The strongest cultivators aren't the ones who hit hardest. They're the ones who never get hit. The old joke goes that the only secret of the nascent soul who lost 1,000 duels is that he ran faster than all 1,000 winners. I decided to build my entire style around being the man who runs fastest and stabs from the dark. Around then I also changed my technique, and I need to tell you about it because it's the closest thing I have to a soul. I traded up from the cheap Tao source scripture to a top-grade method called the Azure Wood Emperor scripture. 9 times the magic power of a normal technique. Hundreds of extra years of lifespan. A transformation art that let my body take on the quality of spirit wood, numb, ultra-hard. And able to disguise my aura as harmless vegetation, which is the finest hiding trick a paranoid man could ask for. And best of all, it let me absorb spirit medicine directly as fuel. Which paired with my garden of 10,000 herbs like it had been designed for me. Lin Bo, Lin Zioru's calm uncle, who'd become my grudging tutor at 20 stones an hour, warned me off it. 9 times the power means 9 times the cost, he said. You'll burn resources like a bonfire and probably never reach the technique's full height. A method for the sons of immortals, not for a boy with a medium root and a rich ancestor story. And I told him the truth, the one true thing I let myself say out loud that whole year. Because I needed one person to understand what I actually was. I told him I don't care about reaching the top of the technique. I don't care about foundation or golden core or any of the little flags you plant on the way. I care about one thing, and it's longevity. Not living well, living long. Living and then living more past every wall they build to stop me. I am willing to die on this road, that's the joke of it. I'm willing to die trying not to die, and if getting there means I have to seize or kill or be killed, then I'll seize and kill and take my chances at being killed. But I will not spend one single day of my life without a hope of longevity in front of me. I'd rather be a wolf that starves chasing the horizon than a house dog that lives fat and short. Lin Bo went quiet for a long time. And then he said, almost to himself, that he'd spent his whole life being a very comfortable house dog, and that he'd just realized he was sitting across a table from a crazed wolf, and he wasn't sure anymore which of them had wasted their years. I didn't gloat, it wasn't a win. It was just the first time I'd said the thing out loud, and I found I meant every word of it more than I'd known. That's the engine under all the scheming, by the way. Not greed for gold, terror of the machine that gets to decide how long you last. I had seen exactly one door in the whole world that claimed to open onto forever. And I was going to walk through it or die in the doorway, and I was not going to be polite about which. The garden, meanwhile, was becoming something I hadn't planned. I'd meant it as a farm. It was turning into a world. I'd been seeding it with everything, spirit herbs by the 10,000, spirit bees that made pill-grade honey, spirit earthworms to build the soil, snakes whose eggs were as good as low-grade pills, one of every spirit beast the sect sold. And left alone with predators and prey and pressure, the whole thing had started to evolve on its own. The swift-winged rabbits, hunted by my growing centipedes, got faster and tougher with every generation, clawing their way up toward real spirit beast tier just to survive. The beasts sorted themselves into territories. A living food chain assembled itself inside my skull, each layer feeding the next, and all I had to do was reach in and eat the strongest thing in it. I stopped thinking of it as a treasure. A treasure is a thing you spend. This was a thing that grew, a whole green-willed swamp of my own, compounding in the dark, asking nothing, feeding me forever. I named it later. For now it was just the space, and it was making me rich and strong faster than any honest cultivator on the mountain. And the only thing left to manage was the one thing my garden couldn't grow, other people, and the trouble they insist on bringing. Which brings me to zoo heaping. And the ugliest lesson I learned that year, the one about what it costs to bury a man who won't stay buried. Zoo heaping was the righteous one. I told you that at dinner, loud, principled, furious at how unfair the sect was. And here's the thing I have to admit, he was right about everything. The sect did hoard its pills. It did waste them on dull family brats while real talent starved. The bottom was welded shut. Every word of his drunk rage was true. He was still the most dangerous man in that courtyard to me, and I still buried him, and being right didn't save him one bit. That's the lesson. Up here, being right is not a shield. It's a way to get noticed while unarmed. It started small. Zoo heaping figured out that Gao Fan's mission hall ran on bribes. And he decided to blow it open. And his plan for blowing it open involved cutting in line ahead of my group to grab a mission slot in a way that would get us caught in the crossfire when the deacon got exposed. He'd have burned us to make his point. I read it in about 2 seconds, pulled manhwa back before she stepped in the trap and let it fizzle. And I marked him. Then he got more ambitious. He built a mutual aid society, 20 stones to join, pool the money, fund one member to foundation first. And oh, by the way, wouldn't the generous talisman-genius like to share his famous legacy with the group for the good of all? It was a pyramid with a halo on it. And its real purpose was to squeeze me, use everyone's greed to paint me as the stingy rich man hoarding knowledge from his struggling brothers. I didn't argue with it. Arguing is for people who want to win a conversation. I sent manhwa in to detonate it instead. She stood up in the meeting and loudly, innocently offered to fund me as the group's chosen one, which reframed the whole mutual aid society as the zoo heaping gets rich society in front of everyone, and it died on the spot in a wave of muttering. And then I did the cold thing, because a man who will burn you to make a point once will do it again forever, and I don't leave that kind of debt open. I had Xingyao quietly plant a handful of bribed disciples into Zoo Heaping's little society, and grow it past the legal size where mutual aid becomes coercion in the sect's eyes, and then had them report him to the law enforcement hall. Gao Fan, who I'd paid, and who had his own reasons to want Zhu Heaping gone, made sure the charge stuck. And the punishment for organizing coercion among disciples is the soul-extracting whip. 25 lashes to the primordial spirit. It doesn't cut your skin. It cuts the thing behind your skin, the self, the spark you cultivate with. When they were done, Zhu Heaping's foundation establishment was not delayed. It was gone, permanently, forever. There is no pill and no technique, and no ancestor's mercy that regrows a whipped soul. The righteous man who was right about everything walked out of that hall with his hair gone white and his one dream amputated at the root. And the whole point of him, the loud, principled fury, snuffed out, leaving just a cold, quiet thing that hated me and had a lot of time to do it in. I'm not going to pretend I felt good. I'm not going to pretend I felt bad either, because I'd watched him plan to bury my sisters to score a point. And up here, mercy to a man like that is just a delayed suicide. But I'll tell you what I did feel, standing there watching them haul him out. I felt the exact machinery of the manner I'd escaped, running under my own hand now. And I understood for the first time that escaping the machine and running the machine are not opposites. I hadn't beaten the machine. I'd learned to work the lever. That feeling stayed with me. Some things you keep because they're useful. That one I kept because I never wanted to forget what I was becoming while I was still becoming it. Zhu Heaping wasn't done, by the way. A soul-whipped man with nothing left to lose is a specific kind of dangerous. And he'd go find a darker road than the one I'd taken from him, and he'd come back down it years later wearing a corpse's face. But that's later. Pay attention to him. I did. I rebranded his dead society into something that actually served me, an open exchange meeting where disciples shared and improved talisman methods, no coercion, spirit contracted, one generation only, which crowdsourced free improvements to my own craft and quietly funded my puppet maker's research. Gao Fan took it over and thought he'd won something. Everyone thought they'd won something. That's the sign of a good board. Everyone at the table believes they're the one playing you. The Wang sisters watched me do all of it. The trap, the whip, the rebrand, and mailing took my hand afterward and said a thing I've never forgotten. She said, if you're ever the one in trouble, I'll help you even if it costs me my life. Not as a threat, not as a bargain. Just as a fact she'd decided about the universe. I have banked a great many things in my life. Stones, souls, favors, grudges. That sentence is the only thing I ever banked and never once thought about spending. It just sat there in me, gathering interest, quietly making me a slightly less terrible person than I would otherwise have been. And then Lin Bo came back from a trip to the outside world with a piece of news that ended the small game and started the large one. The war was coming. And nobody at the top was even trying to stop it. Somewhere in those building years, I learned Yang Yufeng's story, and I fixed one broken thing in her life. And it's one of the few things I did up there that I'd still do even if it had cost me instead of paid me. You remember Yang Yufeng? Pretty sharp, a knife behind her smile from Jinque Mountain. Here's what the smile was hiding. Her family had been a real family once, a foundation family with their own spirit mountain. And her father had reached foundation establishment, the dream, the summit, the thing 3 generations of a clan pours itself toward. And 2 days later, exactly 2 days, the rival family that had been waiting for precisely that moment killed him and took everything. Because a new foundation cultivator is at his weakest and most watched, and the mountain that raised him is suddenly a prize with the guard dog just barely standing. 2 days of glory and then slaughter, and Yang Yufeng was the orphan who crawled out of it, carrying a blood feud and a killing intent she kept folded up behind a face pretty enough that men underestimated it, which was the only weapon she had left. She told me because I was rising, and a rising foundation prospect is a network, and a network is what revenge runs on. That's the cold read, and it's true. But she also told me because I was, I think, the one person in that courtyard who looked at the knife behind her smile and wasn't frightened of it and wasn't trying to take it away. I understood the knife. I have one too. Her way of surviving up here broke my heart a little, and I don't say that lightly. There was an old foundation cultivator named Cao, lonely, ancient, all his own root-having descendants dead, the last of a line same as her. And he paid Yang Yufeng 200 stones a year to play his dead granddaughter. A 20-year contract to be a ghost for a grieving old man. And it had gone the way those things go. He'd grown bitter and irritable. And he'd started to strike the girl who was pretending to be the child he'd lost, angry at her for not being the real one. I told her the thing that fixed it, and I stand by it as the truest piece of advice I ever gave anyone. I said. The fake part isn't the acting. The fake part is your heart holding back. You're playing a granddaughter and keeping your real self locked away from a man who's paying you to fill a hole in his chest, so of course it curdles, of course he hits. Because you're both starving at a full table. Stop acting. Treat him as a real grandfather. Learn to coax a lonely old man, actually learn it, go study it from someone who knows, and stop asking him for the stones. Give him the granddaughter for free and watch what happens. She did it. She went and learned it from Mailing's mortal mother of all people, a woman who knew how to love difficult old people because she'd spent a lifetime doing it. And the striking stopped, and the bitterness eased, and a lonely ancient cultivator got, at the end of his long, cold centuries, an actual grandchild, fake in blood, real in heart. Which is the only way any of it is ever real anyway. Yang Yufeng's arc, the one wound in her I could reach, closed. Old Cow noticed who'd done it. Of course he did. A foundation cultivator misses nothing. And one day I found a storage pouch dropped on the path where only I would take it. A second-order golden sword talisman recipe, some low-grade artifacts, a few hundred stones. No note, no demand. Just an old man's quiet thank you to the boy who gave him back a granddaughter, paid in the only language his kind speaks, which is treasure. I checked it for traps with a flying sword, because I check everything, and then I pocketed it, and I felt the small, strange warmth of a thing I was still learning was possible up here. That a kindness done without a scheme behind it could pay better than a scheme. And that the two weren't actually opposites, and that maybe the coldest players win precisely because they never let themselves forget the warm move exists. I noted that too. It's one of the more useful things I know. Yang Yufeng never did stop chasing her revenge. Some fires don't go out. But she stopped being alone with it. And years later, when she walked into a war by herself to keep chasing it, she did it with the best gear I could load onto her and a grandfather's memory at her back instead of just a wound. That's the most you can do for a person carrying a fire. You can't put it out. You can only make sure they're not cold while they carry it. The other person I rearranged in those years was Lin Zioru, and I did it by accident, with a single conversation. And I watched it change the whole trajectory of a golden core seed's life in the space of an afternoon. She came to buy pills from me at family internal prices. She was Kai refining level 5 by then, a named disciple of her clan's golden core ancestor, forbidden by her master to reach foundation before she turned 25, drowning in more resources than she could use and more loneliness than she could say. And she kept trying to give me things. Pills I hadn't asked for, batches she insisted I take, the reflexive generosity of a girl who'd learned that the way you keep people around is to buy them. I told her to stop. Stop gifting me, I said, and never take a Tao companion, not for my sake, for yours, because the moment you're seen as a woman who gives things away, the world decides what you're for. That last part landed somewhere I hadn't aimed, and it opened a door, and through the door came the real conversation. Because Lin Zioru had been raised, like every sheltered prodigy, to believe the trial in front of her was about cultivation. Reach foundation, reach golden core, be strong. And I told her the thing her calm Uncle Lin Bo had never taught her, the thing the whole gentle family of 100 virtues had carefully kept her from seeing. The trial isn't cultivation. The trial is the fight over who gets the cultivation. Her family couldn't fund all its foundation cultivators to golden core. The resources don't stretch. So the ones who don't compete get quietly culled, farmed for their essence, married off, set aside. A woman who avoids the fight doesn't get to be peaceful. She gets to be somebody else's resource. Compete or be competed over, seize or be seized. There is no third chair at that table for the gentle. She went very quiet, and then she shattered the stone table between us with one strike of her palm and said, and I've never forgotten it, because it was the sound of a person waking up, then I want the restaurant. I want the golden core. I want the nascent soul. I want to earn my own stones and never take a gift from anyone again. Lin Bo, watching, realized in that moment that the Zhang ancestor had made him a mid-cultivator, a house dog by his own admission, his brilliant niece's protector on purpose, precisely because a power struggle can't be taught by someone who's never fought one. And that the trial had been about the struggle all along, and that a former sackboy had just taught his family's golden child the one lesson the family was too comfortable to teach. And then I gave her the blueprint, because a woman waking up is no use without somewhere to walk. Build your own influence, I told her. Run your own businesses for your own stones. And this is the part that matters, fund the weak. Take a rootless new disciple nobody wants and give them 300 stones, and you've bought a loyalty that outlasts every alliance of equals. Because a person you lifted out of nothing will clear your path to golden core with their own body and count it a fair trade. Interest-bound loyalty. The strong betray you when a better offer comes. The lifted never get a better offer because you were the offer. It's the coldest thing I know, and it's also, I've come to suspect, the warmest, and I've stopped being sure there's a difference. Lin Bo owed me a favor after that, a real one, because I'd handed his family's future a spine. He paid it in pills and in a full set of spirit medicine seedlings for my garden and an invitation to an out-of-sect auction. And he started himself to change, the house dog catching the wolf's fever, muttering now about golden core and seizing, and the mountain of corpses, courting a beast peak woman for a combat secret. A comfortable man remembering he'd once wanted to be a dangerous one. I'd radicalized an entire branch of the Duanmu family with 2 conversations and a broken table, and I hadn't even been trying to. I'd just told them the truth I'd known since I was 6 kneeling in a courtyard. The gentle don't inherit anything up here. The gentle get spent. Lin Zioru became a foundation cultivator ahead of her generation and a genuine friend, in the specific way of 2 people who can't afford softness offering each other the little they have. 1 dinner a month. A chessboard I always lost at, and a debt of a woken-up life that she never once mentioned and never once forgot, which is the most reliable kind of ally there is, the kind who owes you the person they became. Here's how I knew the war was coming before anyone announced it, before anyone would even say the word. I counted golden cores. A sect like manhwa makes a new golden core cultivator about once every 50 years. That's the natural rate. The resources only stretch so far, the pills only cook so fast. But in the last 20 years, the mountain had produced 5 of them. And while we were traveling out to an auction, we watched the sky crack open over a distant peak as a 6th one began to form. 5, 6 golden cores in 20 years, against a resource base that hadn't grown and a territory that hadn't expanded an inch. You don't need to be a strategist to finish that thought. Too many apex predators, one shrinking hunting ground. When the food can't stretch to feed all the tigers stop pretending to be neighbors. Every one of the 5 great sects of Song country was doing the same grim arithmetic, breeding more golden cores than its land could support. And there was exactly one way that arithmetic ever resolves. A sect-destroying war, all the golden cores deployed at once. 90% casualties among the Kai raffiners, the cannon fodder me, and it would grind on for decades. And it was not an if, it was a when, and the when was close. Lin Bo heard the same math and heard a door opening, because that's the difference between a house dog and a man who's decided to become a wolf. To him, the war was where his golden core opportunity lived. A war is a once-in-centuries feast. Storage pouches by the 1,000 torn off the dead. Pills exchanged for valor, enemy sects' whole vaults spilled open on the battlefield. 100 years of hoarded immortal wealth, all of it changing hands in blood, all at once. And to me it was both things at once, the way everything up here is both things at once, the deadliest threat of my life, and the single greatest opportunity I would ever get. Because a war is chaos, and chaos is the only weather in which a nobody with a hidden army can walk onto a field, kill people far above his rank, and walk off with their foundation pills. And have it all written down afterward as the fog of war. The welded funnel I'd been fighting my whole life, the 200 pills a decade, 70% reserved for the family's funnel, was about to be pried open by 10,000 deaths, and the pills were going to be lying on the ground for anyone strong enough and fast enough and cold enough to take them. I intended to be all 3, so I sat down and rebuilt my whole life around a single deadline, reach foundation establishment before the war, or be one of the 90%. Let me lay out the board, because from here on the board is everything. 5 sects. Puppet sect, fewest disciples, but each one walks into battle with 10 or more identical puppets at the same rank as himself. So you never know which figure is the man and which is the doll, and one-on-one they are the deadliest in the land. 10,000 spirits sect, beasts, insects, refined corpses, ghost soldiers. They ride the dead into battle and think it's fashionable. Blood fiend sect, blood arts and body refining, cultivators who make their own flesh into the weapon. Hundred Flowers Palace, all women, the widest grassroots network in Song country, their reach into every town and market. And manhwa, my sect, the most legacies, the most golden cores, the most tightly bound by bloodline. One-on-one, manhwa was probably the strongest of the five. In a war of all against all, probably the strongest is a coin flip you get to make with your life. I made my preparations with the war clock ticking behind everything. I told the Wang for the truth quietly and set the pieces. Xingyao would stop cultivating and stay off the front line entirely. A faction needs a survivor who runs the money, not another corpse. I got him a bodyguard, big honest Guo Lihua, and started feeding Zhang the second-order beast meat from my garden until the farm boy's body refining took off like a grass fire. I moved the core of the mortal Wang clan into Yu City, the one place in Song country that stayed safe in a sect war. Because the sects need somewhere to keep their spark. A seed of each family, mortals and a handful of Kai raffiners, tucked away so the bloodline survives even if the fighting eats everyone else. And I made one decision that changed the shape of me more than any technique. I decided to leave the sect, to go out into the lawless world, to the Greenwood swamp where the rules don't reach, and forge myself in blood before the war forged me in it whether I liked it or not. Because I'd done a frightening amount of scheming and building, and I had a hidden army of beasts and a garden full of miracles. And I had never once actually killed a cultivator. And a man who's never killed, thrown into a war, is just a well-equipped corpse. I wasn't going out there to get stronger. I was going out there to find out if the cold thing I'd been building myself into all this time would actually hold when someone was trying to put a sword through my heart. Turns out it held. But first I had to survive the auction. And the auction is where I learned exactly how the outside world eats people who look rich and travel alone. The outside world, it turned out, was the manor again, just honest about it. Flying out to the auction with Lin Bo and Lin Zioru, we watched 5 masked robber cultivators drop out of the sky onto 2 young travelers, kill them, strip their storage pouches, and vanish, all in the time it takes to tell it, tipped off by a shop clerk who got a cut. No law came. No law was coming. Out here, past the sect's no-fighting walls, the whole civilization was just a thin, polite film over a simple rule: if you look rich. And you travel without teeth, you are inventory. Even the markets were traps. The stalls of rare curiosities were bait. The sellers marked wealthy-looking browsers with tracking scents and divine sense tags, then hunted them down that night. The Duanmu family carried countergear for all of it. Scent maskers, divine sense-blocking cloaks, a little spirit sniffer mouse to smell an ambush coming. Everyone out here lived inside a quiet arms race of predator and prey. And the only 2 roles on offer were predator and prey, and I had spent quite enough of my life being the second one. The auction itself taught me the war was real, in a language I trust more than rumor: prices. A foundation pill came up on the block. They start around 10,000 stones. This one sold for 23,000, and the auctioneer smiled and hinted delicately that we should all enjoy these prices while they lasted because they were only going up. When the single most important object in a cultivator's life doubles in price, it isn't inflation, it's a countdown. Everyone with real information was hoarding the pills, because everyone with real information knew the war was near enough to smell. I didn't bid on the pill. I couldn't have afforded that fight yet, and anyway I had a better plan for getting my pills than paying for them. What I bought quietly at a grubby underground auction where the goods have no honest origin was a coil of 300-year-old yin soul wood. 300 stones, a dark, cold, unpleasant material, the core ingredient for an artifact called a myriad soul's banner, a thing that traps and stores and strengthens the souls of the dead, a ghost army in a flag. I looked at that ugly black wood and I saw my whole future combat doctrine folded up inside it. I had a garden that produced infinite beasts. When those beasts died, or when I killed things out here, their souls were just going to waste. A myriad souls banner would let me collect every death I caused and carry it with me as an army that only got bigger the more I killed. The perfect weapon for a man with a bottomless supply of things to kill and a plan to be standing in the middle of a war where everyone was dying anyway. I gave the yin soul wood to Lin Zioru to have refined, because she had the family connections and I did not. She took one look at my grim ghost artifact material and decided it was hideous, and informed me she was going to have it made into something pretty, a golden banner, with flowers, with the words "Long Life" written on it in nice calligraphy. My demonic soul-reaping war standard, redesigned by a girl with excellent taste and no interest whatsoever in looking evil. I let her. Honestly, it's a better story that way. The most feared object I own is bright gold and covered in embroidered flowers. And the first thing a man sees before it eats his soul is very tasteful penmanship wishing him a long life. And in that market waiting to be preyed on, I found the person who'd become the architect of my whole world. Though at the time she was just a cornered girl at a losing stall. Her name was Shenyi. She was small and sharp-eyed and stuck at Kai refining level 3. Because she had a genuinely poor root, and she was, despite that, one of the finest formation masters I would ever meet. An orphan who'd inherited a real array master's legacy and storage bag. And who could draw formations that a foundation cultivator would respect in a body too weak to defend a single one of them. Which in the outside world is not a gift. It's a brand that says, rob me. There was a man doing exactly that. Guo Ming of the Guo family, second-order Spirit Mountain money, who had parked himself in front of her stall day after day, blocking her customers, bleeding her stones dry, waiting patiently for the moment she got desperate enough to leave the market's protection so he could take her legacy. And take her out where no one would stop him. A slow, patient, civilized kind of hunting, the worst kind. I bought her formations. Fairly at good prices, more than she asked, a spirit-gathering array, a beast-luring killing array, a concealment array, because I genuinely wanted them, and because a girl who can build a movable mounting-guarding formation is worth more to a man like me than any pill. And I looked at Guo Ming leaning on her stall with his patient, ugly smile. And I did a thing I hadn't planned to do on this trip. I marked him, second name on the private list. And I left Shenyi my contact addresses, and told her if the day ever comes that you need out, reach me. I meant it, too. Not as a scheme, or not only as a scheme. I won't lie to you and say I didn't already see how useful she'd be. But somewhere under the calculation was a smaller, older thing. I knew exactly what it looks like to be the valuable, defenseless person that a patient, smiling man is slowly starving into a corner. I'd been the sack boy at the tea stall with 8 guards and a garden no one could see. I remembered who I'd wanted to come around the hill, so I decided I'd be the thing that comes around the hill, later, when I was strong enough to do it right. First, though, Guo Ming and I were going to have a conversation about his arm. And that conversation was my first real fight and my first real kill, and the day I found out the cold thing held. Lin Bo set the table for us. Out past the market in the lawless open, he baited a nest of robber cultivators, dangled some valuable-looking goods, let the predators come. And then showed us what a real cultivator does to men who hunt the weak. 6 Guo family rogues and a great perfection bandit, gone in the time it took his 5-sword beast formation to close. He did it casually, the way you'd swat flies off a meal, and he left me exactly 2 men near my own level, alive and trapped, because he'd correctly understood that I hadn't come out here to watch. Lin Zioru went first and stunned me a little. Sweet, story-loving little Lin Zioru, who I still half-pictured as the girl demanding to know what happened next, walked up to 5 rogue cultivators and killed them, one after another, with the cold efficiency of a girl who had done the math on the outside world years ago. Sharp artifacts, high-grade talismans thrown in 10-second bursts, an armor-piercing cone punched clean through a man who'd thought a pretty face meant a soft one. She didn't gloat, she didn't flinch. She just did it and then looked at me to see if I was going to be strange about it. I was not going to be strange about it. I'd stopped being able to afford squeamishness at approximately age 6. Then it was my turn, and Guo Ming, who had trailed us out, greedy and stupid, still thinking about Shenyi's legacy, walked right into it. He was Kai refining level 7. I was level 4 with an aura I'd disguised down to look like a weak level 2. On paper, he should have ended me. I want to describe this fight honestly because it's the fight that defined my whole style and there is nothing noble in it. I did not cross blades with him. I did not test his sword against mine or exchange honorable blows. I opened with 2 golden sword talismans to make him raise a guard. And while he was busy guarding, I put 4 pillily pearls, little self-detonating bombs, about 1,000 stones of them, gone in one breath, exactly where a man plants his feet when he braces. I spent a fortune to kill a man a rank stronger than me in under 10 seconds. And I'd have spent triple and called it cheap. That's the doctrine laid bare. I don't fight fair ever on purpose as a matter of principle. Fairness is a thing the strong invented to make the weak die politely. I fight with money and ambush and my whole hidden army, and the goal is never a good duel. The goal is that the other man is dead and I don't have a scratch and I can go home and reach foundation. A born fighter, Lin Bo called me afterward, watching me stay perfectly calm while I did it. Huge divine sense, cold head, that azure would power. He meant it as praise. I took it as data. Calm under a killing was the one thing about myself I hadn't been sure of, and now I knew. I severed Guo Ming's arm and I did not kill him. That was deliberate, and I'll tell you the reasoning because it's the kind of thing I do. A dead Guo Ming is a mystery his powerful father has to avenge. A living, one-armed, humiliated Guo Ming is a man whose father would rather pay to make the shame go away quietly. So I let him keep his life, and I took 5,000 stones off his father to overlook the whole affair, plus the flying boat. And I left the Guo family owing me a grudge they couldn't afford to collect on. A grudge with the debt facing the right direction is just leverage that hasn't been spent yet. And I told the one-armed man before I let him crawl off, stay away from the girl at the stall. Shen Yi is mine to look after now. He didn't listen. Men like that never listen. It's what makes them men like that. But I'd said it, and I'd meant it, and I'd put his arm on the ground to prove I could reach him. When I came back for Shen Yi properly, years later with an army, it was Guo Ming standing between us again. And by then I'd grown enough to do the thing right instead of halfway. But that's a later chapter, and I'm getting ahead of myself, which the sisters are always telling me not to do. Here's what that first kill taught me, the practical lesson under the character one. One-shot artifacts, thunder beads, armor-piercing cones, pillowy pearls, can kill a man above your rank if you place them right and you're willing to burn the stones. Which meant the whole game was gear and positioning, not personal power. Which meant a man with a bottomless mine and no shame could outfight cultivators who'd spent decades on their technique, simply by refusing to meet them where they were strong. I recentered everything on that. Never fight up close. Let the beasts and the puppets and the ghosts tank the front. Stand in the back and spend money until the problem is dead. It is not a glorious way to fight. I have never once cared about glorious. Glorious is for the eulogy, and I'm not planning on one. We went home from that trip and I had my first blood, my first real gear, an array master ally in waiting, and a war on the horizon. And I did the thing a wise man does with a horizon full of war. I built, and I built, and I built. And I turned my little talisman-genius operation into something that could feed an army, and I finally gave my hidden world its name. Between the first blood and the swamp, there were a few years of nothing but getting ready, and I want to give you two pieces of it. Because one taught me how I actually fight, and the other taught me what I'm actually afraid of. The first piece, I bought a war on credit and then lost to it in my own head. I spent nearly everything on a proper combat kit, a heavy smashing peak, an unbreakable binding rope, a tortoiseshell shield, a wood and metal sword sharp enough to shame a real blade, boots to ride the wind, dragon-blooded scale armor, and a fistful of self-detonating pearls, all of it medium rank but high-rank quality, the best a Kai raffiner could carry without looking like a target. And then I took the whole glittering arsenal into my garden, full kit, and sparred my 9 beasts at once to test it. I lost. Badly. Humiliatingly. Zio Yun rained wind blades from a sky I couldn't reach, while 8 centipedes erupted out of the ground under my feet from directions I couldn't guard. And my beautiful, expensive kit did not save me, because the kit was never the point. The point, the whole lesson, the thing I built my entire style on afterward, is that combat up here is not about power. It's about the sky and the ground. It's about the strike you don't see coming from the direction you can't watch. My beasts, without a shred of killing intent, playing, overwhelmed a fully equipped cultivator simply by being fast and coming from everywhere. So I stopped trying to be a strong fighter and committed completely to being an impossible one. The beasts and the puppets and the ghosts tank the front and swarm the flanks. And I stand in the back and never, ever let anyone reach me, and the fight is won before it's a fight. It is not glorious. I keep telling you I don't care about glorious. Glorious men die on time. The second piece was the fear, and the fear had a name, the Azure Wood Emperor. My technique, the 9 times power Azure Wood Emperor scripture that was slowly turning my body to spirit wood, was too good, too complete. It read like a masterwork, a synthesis of every wood technique that came before it, written by some arrogant emperor-tier prodigy who'd solved problems the other methods only stumbled through. And the more I studied it, the more a cold thought grew. Whoever wrote this was probably alive. Probably broke, nobody can afford their own 9 times technique. And probably, given what the method does, farming other cultivators as self-cultivating spirit medicine, the way the golden and silver twins farmed their buyers, the way the technique was quietly trying to farm me. Because a man who turns his own body into living medicine has, sooner or later, the obvious terrible thought about turning other bodies into medicine too. I'd had that thought. I want to be honest that I'd had it, in the ugly speculative way my mind has late at night. If the world is people farming people, why not be the best farmer? And the reason I'm telling you is that I chose deliberately not to be. I built a guild of the freed instead of a crop of the caged. But the technique in my own veins kept whispering the other way. And the emperor who wrote it was out there somewhere as a preview of what I could become if I ever got tired enough or scared enough to stop choosing. So I did the thing I do with everything that frightens me. I made a plan for it. Someday, I decided, when I'm strong enough, I'll find the Wood Emperor, and I'll lure him into a mountain formation, and we'll have a very long chat about what he's built and what it costs. And if the technique ever grows a golden core chapter I can't survive, I'll run, because I always run faster than the thing chasing me. And I seeded, right then, a much larger ambition, the one that came to full flower years later on a dragon's back over a rigged war. I wasn't going to be anyone's crop, and I wasn't going to spend my life renting a dead genius's masterwork either. Someday I was going to write my own. Between the two lessons, fight from everywhere, and never let the technique choose for you, I finished making myself into a weapon. And I trained my 9 beasts into one seamless thing, centipede waves and falcon blades moving like a single animal with my mind at the center of it. And then, cold enough and equipped enough and frightened enough of the right things, I pointed my new boots at the Greenwood swamp and went to find out if any of it held. I'm going to give you the next few years fast, because they were mostly work. And work montages are boring even when they're your own life. The Wang Empire grew. Rice shops became a rented manor, became a real faction, 100 mortal Wang people in Yuyu, a handful of hired cultivators, servant children tested for roots, a whole small economy with me invisible at the top of it. I took over a restaurant on the mountain, the flying Immortal Pavilion, 5 stories of it. Because every restaurant up here has a foundation cultivator quietly backing it, and owning one made me look like a man with normal, traceable, boring wealth. I kept the manager, a Kai-perfection beauty named Huarong whose own foundation dreams hung on the place, and let her run it, and used it as a listening post and a place to hand out favors. I want to be careful about one part of the mountain's economy, because the outside world is uglier than I like to dwell on, and I refuse to dress it up as fun. There was a place called the Jade Phoenix Tower, officially a house of performers and hostesses, where cultivators short on stones could earn them by singing and dancing and keeping rich patrons company. Officially, I'll leave it there because the people caught in that machine were people, some of them people I knew. And they're being ground up by the same welded funnel that ground everyone was not a joke, and I won't make it one. A Kai-perfection beauty could be forced to dance for stones she'd never otherwise scraped together. And the sect called it opportunity, the way the sect called everything opportunity. I said it with the rest of the reasons I was never going to let the mountain decide my fate. It was a long list by then. Lin Zioru and I got closer in those years, in the specific way 2 people get close when neither of them can afford to be soft. She reached foundation ahead of most of her generation and stayed sharp and beat me at chess so consistently it became a running joke between us. I'd set up a board, she'd dismantle me in a dozen moves. And I'd remind her that I don't win games of chess, I win the room the chess is played in, and she'd tell me that was exactly the kind of thing a man who can't play chess says. She was lonely in a way that surprised me. Everyone fawned over the golden root prodigy. And the fawning is its own kind of solitude, and I was one of the few people who never changed his face around her. She asked for 1 dinner a month. I gave her 1 dinner a month. It was the closest thing to friendship either of us had time for, and we both knew it, and neither of us said so. She delivered the longevity banner, finished, that gaudy golden flowered horror I loved on sight. It did 2 things. It stored and strengthened the souls of the dead, a ghost army I could grow with every kill. And it could unfold into a yin-soul grand formation, an illusion so total that the men trapped in it believed they stood in a celestial palace, while their souls were quietly drained, tasteful gold penmanship and all. I fed it at first on the endless dying swift-wind rabbits of my garden, 50,000 small souls, banked, waiting for bigger ones. Shenyi came fully over to me in those years too, and it was the best trade of my life. I sent her pills and stones and covered her cultivation. And in return, she gave me things no amount of money buys on the open market. A 20-lie combined array that could gather spirit Kai and defend and conceal, and cast illusion all at once, self-powered. A set of 5 elements array-breaking flags that could crack any second-order formation and let me walk out of any trap. And best of all herself, a living formation master, planning the day she could turn my whole hidden world into a self-generating grotto heaven instead of just a farm. I still owed her a proper rescue from Guo Ming's slow siege, and I still meant to pay it. But she'd chosen to trust me before I'd earned it, on nothing but a fair price and a promise. And I don't forget who does that. My arsenal came together piece by expensive piece, and I'll spare you the shopping and just tell you the shape of it, because you'll want to know what I'm bringing to the war. 8,000-legged centipedes growing toward second order, each one a burrowing armored ambush. Zio Yun, my falcon, wind blades from the sky. 101 small consumable miracles, thunder beads, pilloly pearls, armor-piercing cones, the one-shot artifacts that kill above your rank. Cloud-stepping boots that let me fly without a sword and blink 20 zhang sideways through a fold in space, so that the killing blow meant for me landed on the air where I'd just been. A body turning slowly to spirit wood under the azure wood scripture, numb, hard, and able to disguise me as a harmless shrub. And the longevity banner filling up, and I gave the world in my head its name. I'd stopped calling it the space. It had become too alive for that. I'd been building it into a refuge and an arsenal and a self-feeding world. And the women I'd freed and the allies I'd gathered had started quietly to make a home of it. So I named it after the thing I actually wanted it to be, not a treasure, not a mine. But a hidden heaven, a place my people could be safe while I went out and did the ugly work of keeping them that way. Then I hit Kai refining level 7, late and steady, and I looked at my army and my arsenal and my war clock. And I decided it was time to stop building and go bleed. I left the sect disguised as a poor wandering cultivator, with a garden full of miracles and a heart I'd spent 5 years making cold enough for what came next. I told the Wang sisters I'd be back. I told Lin Zioru I'd bring her a foundation pill I earned myself, and I pointed my boots at the Greenwood Swamp, the one lawless resource ground in Song Country, where the robber cultivators hunt and the Yao beasts breed and men go to get strong or get eaten. I went there to do 3 things. Blood my beasts to full first order. Gather the materials for the top-tier gear I'd need to survive a foundation cultivator. And find the people who'd fill my hidden heaven, not with prey, but with allies. People like me who'd been marked as inventory by a world that only had 2 roles, and who might choose a 3rd one if somebody finally offered. The Greenwood Swamp did not care about my plans. The Greenwood Swamp just wanted to know if I could kill. The Greenwood Swamp is not a place, it's a verdict. 1,000 lie of poison water and drowned trees, where the only 2 kinds of people are the ones hunting beasts and the ones hunting beasts. And the swamp itself doesn't much distinguish between your corpse and a crocodile's. I joined a demon-hunting team to learn the ground, led by a woman named Bai Yan, clever, hard, with a motto she said like a prayer, never abandon a teammate, progress together. We hunted for the better part of a year. By shuey crocodiles, purple cloud eagles, the earth and metal beasts I fed to my centipedes to fatten them towards second order. I kept my real strength folded up small, played the modestly competent newcomer, and watched. Because the fastest way to understand a place is to be underestimated in it for a while. I learned the swamp's oldest truth quickly. Out here, the knife in your back is always a teammate's. And mine came right on schedule. 2 men on Bai Yan's team, a pair of brothers, decided my gear was worth more than my company and started plotting to lead a beast tide into me. And then something worse arrived. An old man and a gentle-voiced woman, the golden and silver twins. And I recognized them the way you recognize a nightmare you've been warned about. They were the couple who sold copies of the Azure Wood Emperor scripture, my own technique, and then murdered every single person who bought one, farming buyers like a crop. They had come for me because I cultivated their bait, which meant that from their side of the world I was the crop. They didn't open with force. They opened with words, which is smarter. And the words they chose were poison whispered to Bai Yan, that saving me would cost the lives of everyone else on her team, that the majority mattered more than one strange newcomer. And Bai Yan, who prayed never abandon a teammate every morning, abandoned me by lunch. I don't even blame her. It was the correct call with the information she had. She just didn't have the information. The information was that I had been the most dangerous person in that swamp the entire time, and I'd been bored. So I stopped being bored. The two plotting brothers ran first, and I killed them before they'd gone 30 zhang. My Kingjin sword carries an assassination spell that arrives before the sound does. And their heads came off between one stride and the next. The golden and silver twins I did not kill quickly, because I wanted their souls intact and their knowledge more. I unfolded the longevity banner and dropped them both into its illusion, that celestial palace mirage, gold flowers, and tasteful calligraphy, while the ghosts inside it went to work on them. My centipedes erupted out of the ground and dragged down the twin apes they fought beside. I took the old man's arm off, the way I'd taken Guo Ming's, because a severed arm is a very efficient way to end a negotiation before it starts. And there was Bai Yan, caught in the open between the man she'd abandoned and the monsters she'd abandoned him for, watching the strange, quiet newcomer turn out to be the thing the whole swamp should have been afraid of. Here is where the story of my hidden heaven really begins. And here is where I have to be honest about the shape of it, because the shape matters. I could have done to Bai Yan and the others what the twins had done to me. The swamp would have called it normal. That's the road the golden and silver twins walked, the road the whole outside world walks. You find someone valuable and weaker. And you cage them and you drain them and you tell yourself the two roles are the only two roles there are. Predator and prey, owner and owned. The manor forever all the way up. I'd spent my whole life deciding I would build the third thing. So I ran the golden and silver twins down, the swamp's real monsters, the crop farmers, the ones with a decade of murdered buyers behind them, and those two I broke for good. And their knowledge and their goods and their souls I took without a shred of guilt, because the world is better with them dead, and I am the one who made the world better. But the people they'd been about to feed on, the frightened and the cornered and the marked for inventory, those I did a different thing with. I offered them the other thing. Bai Yan first. Once she understood what I actually was and what the twins had actually been, she stopped calculating who to abandon and started, warily, listening. And I made her the offer I'd built my whole hidden heaven to make. Not a cage, a choice. Come into my garden, my hidden heaven, the world behind my eyes that no slaver and no robber and no golden core can ever reach, and be safe. And be free, and put those clever hands to work. She was a gifted alchemist starving in a swamp that only valued her as loot. In my heaven she could refine pills in perfect spirit kai, keep what she made, answer to no patron. And never again be the valuable, defenseless thing a patient man corners. All I asked in return was the work itself. The pills, the craft, the shared building of a place worth living in and loyalty freely given. Which is the only kind worth having. She thought I was lying at first. Everyone did at first. The outside world had trained them that an offer this good is always the bright paint on a deeper cage. So I did the only thing that proves it. I let her leave whenever she wanted, and I meant it, and slowly she believed it. And then she chose to stay not because she couldn't go, but because for the first time in her life she'd found a place she'd rather be than gone. Bai Yan became the first of them. My chief alchemist, the heart of the guild that grew in my hidden heaven, a guild of people the world had marked as prey, who'd chosen the third road and become artisans instead of inventory. And she wrote to her sister to say she was alive and safe. And she started, quietly, to build the thing I'd been dreaming of since I first understood what my garden could be. Not a farm of beasts, a gathering of people, free and safe and brilliant, pooling their crafts, making my hidden heaven into a forge that could arm me for a war, and give them, in the trade, the one thing the outside world would never sell them at any price. A home nobody could reach to take away. That was the plan anyway. Building it was going to take blood, and the next people I offered the third road to came with a robber's chains already on them. And I had to break the man holding the chains to make the offer at all. The golden and silver twins had run a whole operation, a crew of robber cultivators under them, hunting the swamp. When I broke the twins, the crew was suddenly a leaderless pack of dangerous, desperate killers. And I did the thing I do, which is look at a problem and see a tool. The sharpest of them was the woman I came to call Silver Wraith, intelligent, ruthless, the kind of person who'd survived the swamp precisely because she never once let sentiment slow her hand. A wasted person. A person the outside world had turned into a weapon and pointed at other victims because that was the only role it ever offered her. I offered her the other role. Not owner and owned, I'd never build my heaven on that, I've told you why. A deal, clean and hard, the kind of person like Silver Wraith could actually believe because it didn't pretend to be kind. Swear to me by oath and spirit contract. Turn the pack around. Instead of hunting victims, hunt the hunters, the robbers, the slavers, the crews out here doing exactly what your old masters did. Bring me the demon cores and the array materials my heaven needs. Fight for me when the war comes. And in return, real pay, real protection, and at the end of it, a foundation pill and a clean name, a road up, out of the role the world nailed you into. Which is the one thing you have never once been offered and the one thing you actually want. She took it, so did the ones worth keeping. And I want to be plain about the ones who weren't because I won't paint myself softer than I am. Some of that crew were simply the twins with smaller ambitions, men who'd keep praying the second my back turned. Those I cut loose, hard and final, and I won't dress up what cut loose means in the swamp except to say I didn't lose sleep. Because I'd read every one of them and I read true. A demon-hunting team of reformed hunters is a beautiful thing. A demon-hunting team with 2 demons still in it is just a slower ambush. I don't build those. Silver Wraith's team became my reach in the outside world, 20-odd blades that grew toward 50, hunting the men who hunt, banking materials for my war. It's the closest thing to redemption the swamp had ever offered any of them, and I'll admit I didn't offer it for their souls' sake. I offered it because a man building an army takes his soldiers where he finds them. And the most loyal soldier in the world is the one you lifted out of a hole nobody else would even look into. Interest-bound loyalty, I used to call it, back when I was colder about the words. Lift a drowning person and they'll swim beside you for life. It's cynical and it's true, and it also sometimes, when I wasn't watching, turned out to be the other thing too. Mei Lin came to me in chains. She was a young robber cultivator herself, but a small one, a captured and used one, the prisoner of a crew of 6 siblings who were baiting a bounty hunter when I found them. I killed the 4 worth killing, Kingjin assassination, earth spikes from below, the longevity banner drinking their souls, and I looked at the girl they'd been dragging along as inventory. And I offered her the 3rd road, and she took it so fast it nearly broke my heart, because it told me exactly how the 1st road had been going for her. She joined the guild. Number 2 through the door of my hidden heaven, and the bounty hunter those 6 siblings had been baiting, I let her go. Her name was Bai Yu, a Kai-perfection beauty with a firm Tao heart, poisoned and trust, and about to become somebody's trophy when I broke the trap. And here's the thing I need you to see clearly, because it's the whole proof that my 3rd road was real and not just a prettier cage. Bai Yu was valuable. Skilled, beautiful, worth a fortune to the kind of man the swamp makes. The outside world would have caged her without a second's thought. I unbound her, cleaned the poison out of her, took nothing but her jade pendant as a token that a debt was owed, left her, her stones, her artifacts, all of it, blindfolded her so she couldn't find my heaven, and walked her to safety and let her go. Not because I'm gentle, because she wasn't looking for a home. She had a firm Tao heart and a road of her own, and a place she was already going. And the 3rd road I offer isn't a trap I spring on everyone valuable. It's a door I hold open for the people who have got nowhere else. Bai Yu had somewhere else. So I held the door and she looked at it and walked her own way, and owed me her life, and that was exactly the right ending. She realized, somewhere in there, that I was the sword cultivator who'd nearly killed her once in a different fight. And now had saved her instead, and she filed me the way I file everyone. We'll meet again, she said. We did. But that's later. That's the difference if you're keeping track. The golden and silver twins farmed the valuable and murdered the useful. I free the cornered and release the ones with somewhere to be. It is not sainthood. I run an army and a hidden world on it, and I profit from every soul in it. But there is a real line between what I built and what the swamp builds, and I bled to keep on the right side of it. And I'd like the record to show that, because the schemes are loud and the line is quiet, and I don't want you to miss the line. My hidden heaven filled slowly with the freed and the chosen. Alchemists, talisman makers, formation hands, all of them people the world had priced as prey, now building the thing that was going to let me walk into a war and out the other side. And then 3 years passed, and I was Kai refining level 9, riding my grown falcon over a swamp I half-owned, with a guild in my heaven and blood on my hands and a war still coming. And I went home to the sect. Because there were a few last pieces I needed before the real hunt, and one of them turned out to be a golden core's severed soul, hiding inside the sleeve of the arrogant boy I'd marked on my very first day. Let me set up the last pieces first, because the pieces are the whole reason I survived what came after. Back at the sect, the war clock had gotten loud. The sect had opened a standing exchange. Turn in 100 first-order beast corpses and some herbs, get a foundation pill, no limit, come one come all. Which sounds generous until you understand what it is. It's the sect turning the foundation pill into the only currency of the coming war, draining every disciple's stones and beasts and years into pills. So that when the fighting starts, everyone's whole fortune is a single pill they'll spend their life to earn and then die holding. The mountain wasn't arming us. It was pre-collecting our estates. Fine. I had a garden that made beast corpses like a river makes water. I'd be turning in plenty. Why Lily's aunt, why Sanji, sold me the item that saved my life more times than any other. The cloud-stepping, moon-chasing boots. A second-order treasure a mere Kai Raffiner had no business wearing, foundation-tier flight speed, 30 zhang of concealing mist, and a short-range spatial break that let me tier 20 zhang sideways through a fold in the world, so the killing blow arrived where I'd been and I was already somewhere else. And I have to tell you what those boots cost her, because it's the outside world in one transaction. Why Sanji had intercepted them from a raffiner and couldn't cover the price. She'd staked herself against the debt. Signed a bond that if she failed to reach foundation in 15 years, she'd owe herself into indenture. Years of her life handed over to whoever held the note. She'd literally bet her freedom on her own talent because the mountain had left her no other collateral. I paid the 30,000 stones and tore up the bond and promised her a foundation pill from the run to come. And she and her niece decided on the spot to come out to the swamp with me and see for themselves whether the strange talisman boy was worth betting on. Everyone up here is always deciding whether you're worth betting on. It's the only real economy there is. Then Lei Tian tried to kill me over a pair of boots and handed me a golden core in the process. You remember Lei Tian, the cold, arrogant one I marked on day one, the boy the story thought was its main character. He'd risen to intersect, still aloof, still certain the rest of us were scenery, and he took one look at my cloud-stepping boots and went white. Because they'd been his, commissioned from the very same cheating raffiner who'd staked Y Sanji and quietly resold out from under him. He ordered me to stop, looked down at me from his flying boat like I was something he'd scraped off it, and threw a wind blade at my head. I answered with a thunder bead and a spatial break sidestep, and his wind blade cut the air where I'd been. And then two strange things happened at once. Lei Tian, who should have been shredded, got yanked backward 5 zhang by a force I couldn't see, something protecting him, something with reflexes faster than his. And my own spiritual sense screamed, not the ordinary alarm of a fight. The deep, animal, hair-standing dread you feel when something far, far above your rank has just noticed you exist, like being marked by an ancient beast in the dark. I did not press the attack. I did the opposite. I threw myself on the mercy of the law enforcement hall for the crime of dueling, got us both arrested, paid for a luxurious cell, and used the quiet to think because I'd seen the thing that saved him. A tiny butterfly on his sleeve, its colors shifting and crawling, and I'd seen that butterfly before in the spiritual beast illustrated record. Lei Tian was carrying something above foundation. And a cold, aloof, arrogant boy who suddenly had reflexes he'd never earned and a treasure he couldn't explain is not a prodigy. He's a puppet with something else's hand inside him, so I did what I do. I didn't fight it, I couldn't, it was a golden core's worth of power. I set the board so that stronger hands would fight it for me. I went to Lin Bo and Lin Zioru and the law enforcement elders, and I made the case calm and thorough that Lei Tian was possessed, a spy, a parasite, a thing wearing a disciple, and I backed it with the beast record page and offered 2 500-year herbs as forfeit if I was wrong. The moment their own lives were on the line, the elders stopped being lazy. Lin Zioru summoned her family's Golden Core ancestor, Lin Yuan, and a law enforcement Golden Core named Wu Long, and they tested my spiritual sense against real killing intent, and it matched, my dread was true, and then they went and cornered Lei Tian's cell with a soul-suppressing pagoda and a pill furnace and said, in the voice you use on a thing hiding in a person, "Fellow Taoist, stop hiding, come out." It was exactly what I'd read. A remnant Golden Core soul, the surviving fragment of a dead Golden Core cultivator, a soul without a body that had crept into the sect hunting a taproot disciple to possess and be reborn in. It had picked Lei Tian for his talent. It had nearly picked a war with the wrong nobody. The elders took it from there, the way elders do, behind closed doors and far above my pay grade. And I sat with the Wang sisters and drank wine while the mountain shook in the distance, and my 2 forfeiterbs stayed safe in my pouch. I want you to notice what just happened, because it's the purest version of the only trick I have. I did not beat a golden core. I am a Kai refiner. What I did was see the truth one beat before anyone else, and arrange the room so that the people strong enough to act had no choice but to act in my direction. I don't win the fight. I win the board the fight is played on. I've been telling you that since the beginning. And here's the proof. A boy who can't play chess just used 2 golden cores as his pieces and didn't lose a single herb doing it. And they paid me for it. My reward, pulled from the parasite's spoils, was the shifting butterfly's true form, an egg. An illusion dream butterfly, a near-extinct ancient tracking insect. At low rank it conceals and it tracks across 100 lie and then 1,000 as it grows. Higher it spins illusions, higher still it kills. The perfect scout for a man who fights from the dark. I hatched it and it bonded to me, one more silent piece in my growing hand. The sisters worked out the rest of the elders' meaning before I did. The butterfly wasn't only a reward. It was an order and maybe a test. Lei Tian had been the parasite's chosen vessel, which made him tainted, which made him mine to finish, cleanly, quietly off the books. And if I did it well, and reach foundation, the golden core ancestor Lin Yuan might just take a former sack boy as a personal disciple. So I went and found Lei Tian, free again, the soul cut out of him, back to being merely arrogant. And I stood close and I told him without heat, the way you'd note the weather. When you threw that wind blade at me, you were already dead. You just get to keep walking around for a while first. Enjoy it. He didn't understand. They never understand until the last appearance. But I'd said it, and I meant it, and I'd already scheduled it. And Lei Tian went onto the very short list with Xing Hu near the top now, waiting for the Lingyao garden where the sect's rules don't reach and old debts finally come due. Then I gathered a crew, and we went hunting. The crew I took into the Greenwood swamp was 16 people, and it was, I'll be honest, mostly women. And there is a reason for that which is not the reason you're thinking, so let me explain the plan before you judge me for it. Out here, a team of women reads as prey. That's the whole ugly grammar of the outside world. A party of female cultivators is, to every robber cultivator watching, a purse that hasn't been picked up yet. So I weaponized the grammar. My crew would split into pairs and wander the swamp looking soft and rich and unescorted, bait dangling in 6 directions at once. And every predator who came for the easy purse would find himself walking into a prepared killing array with my whole hidden army waiting in the center of it. We weren't hunting beasts. We were hunting the men who hunt, using their own assumptions as the hook. The nastiest fishing there is, and the most just, because the only fish that bites is a fish that came to prey on the weak. The crew, the Wang sisters, of course, mailing steady now, matriarch steady, and manhwa still all fire and needling. Lin Zioru, a foundation cultivator now, with her 5-woman 5-elements combined attack formation, 5 swords that struck like 25 cultivators when they locked together, though the formation drank mana like a drunk. Wai Sanji and her niece Wai Lily. Yang Yufeng, who came with a private agenda I already knew about. She wanted me eventually to help her exterminate the family that had wiped out her own the day her father reached foundation. Big Guo Lihua, my body cultivator bodyguard, force-fed on second-order beast meat until he could split a skull with an axe and shrug off a flying sword. A few others, and I told all of them the truth on the first night. Because a general who lies to his soldiers gets the soldiers killed and then the general. I said, if we ever meet something I can't beat, I am going to run, and I am going to run faster than every single one of you. So do not stand there expecting me to die nobly at your side, because I won't, and don't curse me for it when it happens. They laughed. They thought it was modesty dressed as a joke. It was neither. It was the single most important operational fact about me, and I wanted it on the table. I also invited Yiming, the shifty Lyra, the one who'd leaked my secrets and the sister's beauty to a spy years back, as a test. If he came and showed his true colors out here where I could act, I'd finish an old account. He chickened out at the edge of the swamp, saved by his own cowardice, and slunk home to marinate in envy. Fine. His name stays on the list. The swamp keeps. The hunting started, and it was, for a while, beautiful and cold and exactly as I'd designed it. The first big fight set the tone. My scout swarm, 10,000 spirit bees, my eyes across the whole marsh, found a Bai Shui crocodile nest, and a 30-man demon hunting team already sitting on it. I flew in and said politely that the crocodiles here were mine. They said less politely that I was seeking death, and then I let them find out whose swamp it actually was. Lin Zioru's 5 elements formation lit up. 5 women, 5 swords, striking like a small army, pillars of fire and walls of stone folding the enemy's line. Guo Lihua waded straight into a body cultivator twice his reputation and put him down with 3 axe blows. The man didn't get up. Manhua threw up mirrors of fire that turned the marsh into a furnace. And Mailing, steady, careful Mailing, who still froze for half a heartbeat when the killing started, survived. Because I funneled the enemy at her on purpose, in measured doses, forcing her to grow the only way anyone grows out here, which is by being made to. When their leader tried to surrender, to buy his life with tribute, I unfolded the longevity banner. Myriad Souls banner, someone screamed. My bounty was over 3,000 stones by then, and the banner was already a name men said in fear, and the gold flowers opened. And the Celestial Palace illusion swallowed his whole team, and I harvested 30-odd souls into the flag, while 8 armored centipedes and a wing of puppets closed the doors. I spared one captive, ransomed her clean, and let her people buy her back, because she was a hunter's daughter and not a hunter herself. And that door is one I keep holding for the people who never chose to be predators. Then Mailing threw a small private tantrum at me for putting her in danger, and I coaxed her out of it badly. Because I have never once known what to say to a woman who is angry at me for keeping her alive, and Manhua laughed at me the whole time. Warm beat. I'll take my warm beats where the swamp allows them, which is not often. Then we settled into the loop, and the loop is where I learned what I was actually building out there. 6 lure pairs, 6 directions, bees scouting, Zio Yun watching from the roof of the sky. And me in the center array trap killing whatever the bait drew in. Why Sanji and her niece baited a 10-man robber crew with beauty and the promise of an easy purse, walked them straight into the Greenwood illusion array. And Sanyang put a spear through the leader and said almost to herself, "Lust is a knife men hold over their own heads," and I watched something in her go hard and clear, a woman who'd nearly been indentured for a pair of boots learning, right there in the mud, to turn the world's contempt into a weapon. "These humanoid demons," she said, looking at the men she just gutted, "are going to be my stepping stones." She wasn't wrong. Lai Mei and Yang Yufeng extorted a herb-picking team at Pilloly Point. The Wang sisters baited theirs with Meihua's childish insults, which turned out to be devastatingly effective. Because nothing lures a proud man into an ambush like being mocked by a girl he thinks he can catch. And I said the theme out loud once to the whole crew because I wanted them to know exactly what we were and weren't. "We are not hunting demons," I told them. "There are no demons. We are hunting treacherous hearts. Any team that yields when we say the beasts are ours, like the one Lin Zioru faced down in a standoff, and let walk, we let live, every time, no exceptions. Because a man who chooses to back away from a fight over crocodiles is not our prey. But any team that decides to prey on what looks like a purse full of women, that team was already a robber the second it chose. And the choosing is the crime, and the swamp is where the choosing gets answered. It's not a hunt. It's a test we let people fail. A year of that, and I had nearly enough for a foundation pill of my own, and Lin Zioru nearly enough for hers. And a hidden heaven filling with souls and materials and freed artisans. And then a rest day treasure raid with Yang Yufeng turned up something small and white and absurdly, world-changingly useful, and right on its heels came the Blood Fiend sect. And the first foundation cultivator I ever killed. The small white thing came first. Yang Yufeng took me to a dead foundation cultivator's hidden cave, a find her murdered father had left in his notes, sealed under a second-order array she couldn't crack and I could. Inside, the loot was mostly junk, picked over by time. Except in one damp corner lived a colony of about 100 white bone insects. I'll undersell them because they undersell themselves. They're small. They're pale. They don't spit fire or fly or cast anything. All they do is bite, and be almost impossible to kill unafraid of any of the 5 elements, hard as sect-forged steel, mindless as hunger. One of them is nothing. But they breed, and tens of thousands of them together form a tide that even a foundation cultivator will turn and go around. Because there is no spell for too many small, hard mouths, and no dignity in being eaten by insects one bite at a time. I took the eggs, and my golden centipede, little gold, took one look at the white bone insect corpses and wanted them the way a starving man wants bread. They were exactly the fuel his second-order advancement had been waiting for. 2 gifts in one damp cave. And I did a thing I'd never done before. I buried the dead cultivator's bones before I left. Yang Yufeng watched me do it and didn't say anything, and I didn't explain it because I couldn't have. Something about a foundation cultivator reduced to picked-over bones in a corner, all his centuries of clawing ended in a wet, dark room, had reached past the hard shell I'd built and touched the sack boy underneath. I buried him. Then I went back to work. You can only afford so much of that kind of feeling out here. We were still near the cave when Lin Zioru's transmission came, and it was bad. A blood-fiend sect force had found my main array and was bombarding it, a blood-clothed youth at the head of it, commanding 15 Kai raffiners. And behind him, taking his orders like a servant, was a Foundation establishment elder. Read that again because I had to. A Foundation cultivator, a centuries-old, city-flattening Foundation cultivator, taking orders from a boy, which meant the boy was not a boy. The boy had a background, a bloodline, a treasure, something that made a Foundation elder his errand runner. There was a jade pendant on his chest doing the work. I could see it even through Lin Zioru's hurried description. And that whole force was hammering my Greenwood illusion array, my best second-order formation, with my entire crew trapped inside it. The Wang sisters, Lin Zioru, all of them, gripping their exploding spirit pills, the last resort suicide charge you swallow when you've decided to take someone with you. I got on my gold flame flying boat and I flew yin wind escape burning souls for speed mid-Foundation fast. And I was still too lie out when I understood I wasn't going to arrive before the array broke. So I did the only thing left. I talked. I broadcast to my trapped crew, cold and clear, the exact and total truth. Because panic kills and math saves, and I had nothing to offer them but math. I told them, 1. Lin Zioru and the Wang sisters are not going to die today, I promise you that. Because I will burn everything I own before I let it happen. 2. If I reach you before the array breaks, I save all of you 90% odds I've run it. 3. The only plan that works is the plan where you do not scatter. The 5 elements formation grabs the blood-clothed youth and holds him hostage, because he's the one thing in that force worth more than all of you. And the instant you have him, the Foundation elder has to defend him instead of killing you. And 4, and hear this one. Because I mean it more than the others, I am not going to sacrifice myself to cover anyone's solo run. I don't do noble deaths. So if any of you agrees to stand together and then breaks and bolts mid-fight, leaving the others exposed, you will not die in this swamp. You'll make it home. And then you'll have me and Lin Zioru as enemies for the rest of your very short life, and you know exactly what that's worth. Then I walk them through the picture of what happens if they scatter, who dies first, who dies watching, the whole grim slideshow, until staying together stopped being the brave choice and became the only sane one. And it worked, and the way it worked told me something about people I've never forgotten. It wasn't my promise that steadied them. It was why Lily, the merchant girl who reframed the whole death trap as a ledger, survived this, she told the others. And you don't just live, you bank the biggest favor Chen Lai has ever owed, and his favor is the best investment in this swamp. Stay, fight, collect. She turned a last stand into a business opportunity, and the crew, who'd been staring at their suicide pills, put them away and picked up their swords. Because a profit is a thing a frightened person can hold onto when courage has run out. I'll take a soldier who stays for profit over a soldier who stays for glory any day. Profit is reliable. Glory gets you killed and takes the man beside you with it. The array broke as I came over the last rise. And I finally got to find out the thing I'd built my whole hidden army to find out. Whether a Kai raffiner with 8 centipedes, a soul-stuffed banner. And no shame at all could kill a Foundation cultivator and live to tell a friend about it. Here is how you kill a Foundation cultivator when you are not one. You do not fight him. That's the first rule and the last one. A Foundation cultivator is a different order of being. His divine sense alone could crush mine. His single sword could split my whole crew. If it had come down to me and him, blade to blade, I'd have died in one exchange, and I knew it. So the entire art of what I did that day was making sure it never came down to me and him. I came over the rise, and I didn't announce myself. I opened the longevity banner first, from range, and poured everything the flag had into pinning the elder, the celestial palace illusion clawing at his mind, my 8 centipedes bursting up under his feet to force him to defend low, my whole wing of giant bear and flying wolf puppets swarming his flanks so that a man who could have killed any one of us instantly had to spend every instant swatting the next thing off him. I didn't need to hurt him. I needed to keep him busy. A Foundation cultivator with no free breath is just an angry statue. While the elder drowned in my army, Lin Zioru's 5 elements formation went for the boy. 5 swords, 5 women, striking like 25. And they swallowed their exploding spirit pills to do it. The last resort burn, years of cultivation spent in one furious minute. And they hit the blood-clothed youth like a falling mountain and grabbed him, exactly as I'd called it. And the second they had him, the whole battle inverted, because now the Foundation elder couldn't press his attack. His whole reason for existing, the boy he served, was in my hands. And one wrong move and Lin Zioru's formation ended the thing he'd sworn his centuries to protect. Guo Lihua stood in front of the Wang sisters and let second-order flying swords bounce off a body I'd built out of beast meat and stubbornness. My centipedes took sword strikes meant to kill and lost legs and segments and lived. Because a 1,000-legged centipede's dragon-blooded carapace is the best armor money can't buy, and I had 8 of them, and I did not care about their legs. And me, I stood in the back where I belong, and I did the only thing I'm actually good at. I lied. I taunted the elder. I told him a golden core was already on the way, that my sect's ancestor had marked this fight, that he had 10 days at most to run before something arrived that would end him. And I flashed a fake jade plate as proof. And I watched a centuries-old cultivator, who should have known better, spend precious mana on defenses he didn't need against a threat that didn't exist. Because when you've lived that long, the one thing you cannot afford to be wrong about is the thing that finally kills you. Fear is a resource. I bled his the way I'd bleed anyone's. He broke out the only way he could, self-detonated 2 of his own flying swords, a small fortune blown to buy 3 seconds of chaos, snatched the blood-clothed youth out of the formation's grip, and ran, mid-foundation fast, out over the swamp. And I let him. The whole crew stared at me. After all that, I let him run, and I just tapped the side of my own head, where the illusion dream butterflies mark sat quietly on both of them, glowing to no one's eyes but mine. You don't chase a cornered Foundation cultivator through open ground. That's how the cornered thing kills you on its way out. You let him spend himself running. You let him think he's escaped, and you follow the mark at your own pace, until he's burned every reserve he has and there's nothing left in him but a husk and a hostage. I sent the crew back to the market with a stack of secrecy contracts, because what came next I wanted no witnesses to. And then Lin Zioru and I went hunting the 2 most dangerous prey in the swamp, a fleeing Foundation elder and the boy who owned him. But first I fed the white bone insects to Little Gold, right there on the boat, because a long chase is exactly enough time for a golden centipede to finish becoming a second-order monster, and I wanted him grown before the end of it. He obliged. By the time we caught them, I had 9 second-order beasts and a fresh Foundation pill's worth of confidence. And the elder had nothing left but the one thing men like him keep for last, the choice of how to die. The elder ran for days, and running cost him everything. At the end, he did the thing that tells you a cultivator has run out of road. He used the blood escape technique, which buys you a burst of impossible speed by burning your own lifeblood and lifespan to fuel it. And by the time I caught him with my cloud-stepping boots, he'd spent himself down to a withered husk, a centuries-old man aged 1,000 years in a week, and the boy he served had split off and left him to die alone. That's the reward the blood-clothed youth gave his loyal servant of decades, abandonment, the moment the servant stopped being useful. I noted it. It was going to matter in about an hour. The elder didn't beg. I'll give him that, and I gave it to him then, out loud. Because a man who won't beg has earned an honest word or 2 before the end. He turned around, husk that he was. And he made me a deal instead, a real one, dignified, the deal of a man arranging his own affairs. Deliver a jade slip to Blood Maple Mountain, he said. Leave some goods for my grandson. Do that, and I give you my nascent soul willingly, of my own hand. No fight, no oath needed. I could have taken it by force. I was going to take it either way. But I looked at this dying thing who'd been sold out by the boy he'd bled for, asking with his last breath only that a stranger look after a grandson he'd never see again. And I said yes, and I meant it, and I didn't make him swear a heart-demon oath to bind me to my word. He noticed that. Even dying, he noticed. You don't demand a promise from me, he said, wondering. And I told him the truth. Your enemy is the boy who left you, not me. I'm just the man who was faster, and I don't cheat the dead. He looked at me for a long moment, this ancient cultivator at the end of his centuries, and he said, this one is a real genius. And then he self-destructed his own dantian and gave me his soul as a gift. And I banked it clean, and I kept every word of the deal afterward because I am a great many bad things, but I am not, it turns out, a man who robs a grandson. Then I went and found the blood-clothed youth, and the youth was everything the elder wasn't. He was skin and bones by then, all his background and his bloodline and his borrowed foundation elder gone. Just a terrified boy who'd never once in his life not been the most important person in the room. And when he understood there was no more running, he did the ugly thing, the small thing, the thing the elder would have died before doing. He screamed, "Let's die together," and threw a fistful of thunder beads to collapse the whole cave down on both of us, choosing to murder me out of spite since he couldn't do it out of strength. The cave came down. I earth escaped out through the floor on a centipede's back and walked out the far side, and dusted myself off and picked up the youth's storage bag from the rubble. And I stood there in the settling dust with 2 foundation cultivators worth of soul and spoils, and I said the thing to myself that I've never been able to unsay since. Because it was true, and it was terrible, and it was the exact shape of what I'd become. 10,000 people bet their lives on climbing over each other to reach the immortal path. I just sent 10,000 of them into my banner to carry me up it instead. That's what the longevity banner is. That's what I am. Every soul I take makes the flag heavier and the road shorter. And the whole cruel arithmetic of the funnel, 200 pills, 70% reserved, no way out for outer disciples, I'd found the one exploit it couldn't patch. The system decided who was allowed to rise. It never decided who was allowed to take. And out here, past the walls, taking was the only currency that had never been rigged. The blood-clothed youth had been saving a foundation pill in his bag, his own for his own great ascension. I took it home and gave it to the Wang sisters. I want you to sit with that trade for a second because it's the whole story in one gift. A boy of great background, born to rise, hoarding a pill for his glorious future. And his glorious future ended up in the hands of 2 former daughters of a house that used to own me, handed over by their former servant. Because he decided a long time ago in a locked courtyard that the people who saved him would rise first. The machine took everyone the world thought mattered. I fed them to the people the world said didn't. I came out of that swamp with my whole build proven, a spare foundation pill, 2 banked nascent souls, a second-order golden centipede. And a name men said in fear across 1,000 lie of poison water, and a war still coming. Always the war behind everything getting closer. But before the war, I had a homecoming to arrange. Because there were still names on my list, Lei Tian, and a swaggering fool named Zhu Cheng who'd made the mistake of wanting the Wang sisters out loud. And there was still the small matter of walking back into the sect that had stamped "no way out" on my forehead and showing it exactly how far out I'd gotten. Before the homecoming, I spent a month in my hidden heaven. And that month is where the cheat stopped being a farm and became a factory. Here's the trick I'd stumbled into, the same trick that had made me a fake talisman-genius years before, now grown up. Inside the garden, my divine sense sees everything, every flaw in a stroke, every current in a body, the exact shape of how a thing works from the inside. So I sat with Bai Yan while she refined pills, and I could see the pill wanting to form, and I coached her past every failure before it happened. And her success rate climbed toward 2 in 3, which for an alchemist is sorcery. The same eyes that made me a genius made everyone in my heaven a genius. That's what the place actually is, not a mine, a school where the teacher can see the answer. And then I invented the thing that changed my whole arsenal. And I invented it out of laziness, which is where my best ideas always come from. I'd been skinning demon beasts for talisman materials for years. And one day, looking at a captured beast's innate ability, the way a swift wind rabbit just is fast, the way an earth armor beast just does burrow through stone, I thought, why am I copying these on a talismans by hand badly from memory? Why not take the ability straight from the source? So I did. I learned to peel a beast's innate power off it cleanly and bind it directly into a talisman. An earth escape talisman drawn from an actual burrowing beast. A wind travel from a swift wind rabbit. An ice sword, a concealment, a dozen others, each one a genuine spirit beast ability in a sheet of paper. And each beast's fur grew back, so I could do it again and again forever. Repeated use is the way of the king, I told the guild, feeling very pleased with myself. And Bai Yan told me that was the kind of thing a man says when he's found a way to be lazy at scale, and she was right, and I did it anyway. The guild sorted itself into a real workshop in those days. Bai Yan at the pills, Mei Lin turning out to have a genuine gift for artifice and corpsecraft, others at formations and talismans and puppet work. And yes, they competed hard for whose craft advanced fastest, and yes, I did nothing to cool the competition. Because a workshop of ambitious people racing each other builds better things than a workshop of comfortable ones. That's not cruelty. That's just knowing what makes people sharp. Every one of them was free to walk, and none of them walked. Because outside the door was a world that priced them as prey, and inside it was a world where the best formation hand got the most respect, and the fastest alchemist got the finest herbs. They'd never been anywhere their talent was the thing that mattered. Neither had I once. It's a powerful drug, being somewhere your gift is the currency. I passed back through the Jade Phoenix Tower on the way home, and I'll keep this short and clean. Because I said I wouldn't make jokes about that place, and I won't. It was a house of performers, where cultivators short on stones sang and danced for wealthy patrons to scrape together what the mountain wouldn't give them. That's all I'll say it was, and I'll leave the rest in the file with everything else the mountain does to people and calls opportunity. Bai Yu was there. You remember her, the bounty hunter I'd freed in the swamp, blindfolded and released with her jade pendant taken as a token of a debt. She'd earned enough merit to be reaching for foundation now, and she recognized me across that gaudy room. And she came and danced for me once, the way you settle a debt with the only coin the place deals in, and she pressed a concealment bracelet into my hand as she went. She'd worked out somewhere in the years between that I was both the sword cultivator who'd nearly killed her in one old fight and the man who'd saved her life in another. That I was the hunter and the rescuer both, depending on which day the world caught me on. We'll meet again, she said, same as last time, and this time it sounded less like a courtesy and more like a plan. I remembered her too, but gently. Some names go on the list because I mean to settle them. A few go on a different list, the short one the one I don't have a cold word for. Bai Yu went on the short list. So did Lin Zioru and the Wang sisters. And though I'd never have admitted it out loud back then, a small stubborn handful of the freed and the chosen who'd decided, against all the evidence of their lives, to trust the strange man with a world in his head. Then I pointed myself at the one place in Song country that could still make my heart beat faster. The 10,000 Spirit Sect's Beast Garden, an ancient secret realm older than any sect, where the dragons go to die. The Beast Garden was the strangest place I'd ever set foot in, and I'd been living inside my own skull for years, so that's a high bar. It's a secret realm older than the sects that fight over it, a whole hidden world that breeds dragon-blooded beasts. And it has one iron rule that has kept it deadly for 1,000 years. The moment a beast in there reaches second order, it gets teleported away to somewhere deeper, and nobody who follows the teleport ever comes back. Not disciples, not elders. A nascent soul ancestor tried once, and the garden kept him. So the whole place is a hunting ground where the prey keeps vanishing up a ladder no one is allowed to climb. And the cultivators who work it are all quietly obsessed with the question of where the ladder goes. The 10,000 Spirit Sect disciples worked it in style. They rode corpse dancers and ghost palanquins and columns of ape soldiers, all their dead relatives and enemies refined into servants. Because in their sect ostentation is strength, the more of the dead you can afford to walk around wearing, the higher you stand. I found it ghastly and I kept the technique, because ghastly and useful live in the same drawer for me and always have. A grinning old gatekeeper sold me a map. A map, he said, to 500 dead cultivators' storage bags, all of them lying in the deep parts of the garden where the dragons are. And he grinned wider when he said it, because the joke was obvious. The bags are marked with tracking tokens, and the tokens are what let the garden's keepers find the corpses. And a man who goes collecting corpses tends to become one, so was I planning to gather the dead or join them? I bought the map. Of course I bought the map. I have Earth Escape talismans peeled off real burrowing beasts and a golden centipede that swims through stone. The deep parts of the garden, where a flying cultivator is exposed and doomed, were the one place in the world built for a man who travels underground and steals from below. I buried my own tracking token where it would fool the keepers. And then I went through the dragon caves like a mole through a garden, grabbing storage bags straight out from under sleeping dragons and earth escaping away before the ground had finished closing, dropping decoy tokens behind me. 100 bags, 200. The richest grave robbing in Song country, done by the one thief the garden couldn't catch. And then a woman in a red veil, riding a ghost palanquin, dressed head to toe as a bride, watched me sink into solid rock and decided she wanted to talk. Her name was Su Hong, and she is one of the 2 or 3 most memorable people I ever schemed with. So let me draw her properly. A 10,000 spirits cultivator, walking the corpse and ghost path, and she rode into the deadliest realm in the country dressed as a bride on purpose. Because, as she cheerfully explained, a lunatic bride is the one thing nobody dares attack. Challenge me, she said, and even if you win, even if I die, I bite off a piece of you on the way down. And everyone knows it, so everyone leaves the bride alone. She'd built her whole survival out of being too unhinged to be worth the fight. I respected it enormously. It's my own doctrine wearing a wedding veil never be worth the cost of killing. She'd spotted my Earth escape and wanted an alliance because she needed a way out of the deep, and I had one in my talismans. And because she had her eye on a bigger opportunity than either of us could take alone. We circled each other with our killing intent showing plainly, both of us doing the math, both of us deciding, for now, that a live partner was worth more than a dead rival. And she led me to the thing the whole garden is built around, the place even her ghastly sect speaks of in a lowered voice. The dragon burial ground. Dying dragons, Su Hong told me, crawl to one place to die. A central hollow deep in the garden, wrapped in a fog of extreme yin, where 1,000 years of dragon death has piled up over 1,000 pristine dragon corpses. And over 1,000 dragon spirit yin souls still coiled around them, guarding in death what they couldn't keep in life. 1,000 dragon souls. For a man who carries a soul-leading banner, that hollow was not a graveyard. It was the single richest deposit of ammunition in the world. While we made our way in, she told me her story. And her story told me everything about why the outside world produces people like us. Every 3 years, her sect holds a tournament to the death. Lose, and you don't just die. The winner takes your body, your soul, your blood, and refines you into a servant, a beautiful walking corpse, or a bound ghost to add to their retinue. Those 30-odd green-faced ghosts drifting around her palanquin, the ones I'd taken for trophies, they were her former sect siblings, the people she'd grown up with. She wore her dead friends into battle because in her sect that was simply what victory looked like. And she played the mad bride so that no one would ever make her fight another tournament and add her to somebody else's collection. I'd thought my sect was cruel. My sect welded its own doors shut. Hers fed you your own classmates. There are always deeper floors. I didn't pity her out loud. Pity is an insult to a person who survived something you couldn't. But I understood her completely, which is a rarer and more useful thing, and she felt it. And that understanding is what let 2 apex predators work together over a treasure either of us would happily have killed the other for. The harvest itself was the finest piece of work I did in that whole realm. You can't fight 1,000 dragon ghosts, but you can feed them. I unfolded the longevity banner and poured out its cheapest contents, 50,000 swift wind rabbit souls, the endless small dead of my garden, worthless individually and perfect as bait. The dragon ghosts, mindless in death, fell on the flood of little souls like starving things. And while they gorged, I moved through the fog, picking off dragon yin souls one at a time, quiet as a thief in a pantry, banking each one into my flag. I traded 50,000 rabbits for 100 dragons. It's the best exchange rate I've ever gotten on anything. And here Su Hong showed me the gap between raw and refined. My banner held quantity, hordes of weak ghosts. Her 30 green-faced ghosts, her refined sex siblings, were quality, each one worth 100 of mine. She could refine, I could harvest, and that difference is the whole basis of the deal that made both our fortunes. We couldn't kill each other anyway, we both carried thunder beads. And in that enclosed realm, using them meant mutual burial, so we did the smart thing and got rich together instead. We sealed it with a spirit contract and a heart demon oath. Because neither of us trusted the other 1 inch and both of us respected the other far too much to pretend otherwise. She'd take a share of the dragon yin souls. And in 2 years she'd deliver back 700 elite green-faced ghosts, refined and scaled, enough together, to kill an Erla Foundation cultivator outright. Plus a white bone demon tower. A second-order corpse artifact like a second soul banner that stored and strengthened yin corpses and could grow to third order. Plus the method to refine corpses and ghosts myself, plus 100 trained apes to work my garden. I gave her the dragon souls and a pile of my finest pills. Both of us walked away certain we'd cheated the other, which is the only sign of a trade that's actually fair. And then she told me the real reason she'd wanted an alliance, and it was the best news I'd had all year. She had a rival, a woman who held a golden core seat she wanted, and that rival would be in the Lingyao garden when the Great War Run came. and Su Hong wanted my help killing her, which meant I'd just acquired something priceless, an assassin from a different sect, bound to me by oath and profit, with no loyalty whatsoever to Wanfa, and therefore no reason not to kill Wanfa disciples for me. Every enemy on my private list who happened to wear my own sect's robe had just become reachable, through a mad bride who owed me a dragon graveyard. I hunted dragons in that garden for 2 more years. My centipedes bit them dead. All 8 of them crossed into second order on dragon blood. And I gathered 500 more dead cultivators' bags and 1,000 dragon eggs for my heaven. And when Su Hong delivered on her end, 2 years later, exactly as sworn, I came home with an army that had stopped being a Kai raffiner's collection of tricks and become something a Foundation cultivator would look at and feel afraid. My guild built the last piece from the dragon scale I'd hauled back, 80 Jaya along guards, 1 Jang puppets sheathed in dragon scale, second-order defense, void break teleport, claws that opened top-grade shields like paper, and killed a Kai raffiner in 3 strikes. I could run 8 or 10 of them at once. And I stood in my hidden heaven, looking at 80 dragon puppets and a tower of white bone and a banner heavy with dragon souls. And I thought the thought that had been years coming. With 10 of these, I don't need to trap the next Foundation elder. I can just kill him. The Wang sisters, for the record, completely ignored the dragon puppet army in favor of cooing over the dragon eggs, and informed me that they were already the fish in my bowl, so it was fine if I could only look and not eat, and I did not understand what that meant, and thought it wiser not to ask. Then I went to collect a name off my list, and the name was Shenyi. And this time I'd grown enough to do the rescue the way it should have been done the first time. Shenyi had been trapped in the Huangya mountain market for more than 10 years by the time I came back for her. That's the part that shames me if I let it, so I mostly don't. I'd met her as a boy of Kai refining level 7, marked Guo Ming for preying on her, taken his arm as a warning, and left her my contact and a promise. And then I'd gone off to conquer swamps and rob dragon graves and become a legend for years, while a small brilliant formation master stayed exactly where I'd found her, cornered, starved of customers, waiting for a rescue that took its sweet time growing strong enough to be sure of itself. I told myself I was waiting until I could do it right. That's true. It's also true that doing it right is a very comfortable name for not yet. But I came. Late and grown, but I came. She'd stopped waiting on me, which I loved her a little for. She was that good a formation master. She cracked the market's own second-order guardian array, the thing that was supposed to be uncrackable, and broke herself out and baited Guo Ming into chasing her into the open. A girl stuck at Kai refining level 3, outsmarting a whole market's defenses to make her own escape. She didn't need a hero. She needed the odds evened, which is a different and more dignified thing. Except Guo Ming had cheated, the way his kind always cheats. Somewhere in those 10 years of blocking her stall, he'd gotten a heartless goo into her, a parasite planted through a poisoned spirit fruit, a mother worm nested in her that answered only to him, agony on command, impossible to remove while its master drew breath. So even breaking out was a leash. She could run as far as she liked, and he could drop her with a thought. That was the game he'd been playing the whole decade, not catching her, just owning the ground under her feet so completely that her every escape ended back in his hand. I watched her hit the end of that leash in the open, doubled over, the goo tearing at her, Guo Ming strolling up with his one arm and his patient, ugly smile to collect what he'd waited 10 years for. And then I sent in the dragons. No talismans this time. No spending a fortune in one-shot bombs, no clever exhaustion, no letting him run. I'd outgrown the boy who took an arm and called it a message. 10 Jaya-along guards came out of the ground and the air at once, dragon scale and void break and claws that opened shields like paper. And Guo Ming's 11-man team was gone in the time it takes a proud man to stop smiling. Seconds. That's all the whole decade of his patience was worth in the end. Seconds, against an army he never knew I'd built. Guo Ming understood right at the end, the thing that dignified his death. He understood that he'd never been the hunter, that he'd been my pawn the entire time, that the moment I severed his arm all those years ago, I'd painted a target on him and left him to keep Shenyi caged for me, a jailer who thought he was a lord. And he didn't beg. He looked at the dragon puppets and the man behind them, and he put it together, and he chose to die with his mouth shut. I respected that, the same way I'd respected the blood fiend elder, and I banked his nascent soul with an honest hand. Because I found that the enemies worth remembering are always the ones who go quiet at the end instead of loud. But killing him didn't lift the goo. A heartless goo doesn't die with its master. The mother worm just goes wild, unleashed, worse. And there is exactly one place in the world where I can reach inside a living person and kill 100 hidden worms one at a time without touching the person around them. So I told Shenyi the truth, which after 10 years of being lied to by everyone she'd ever met probably sounded like just one more lie. I said, I can save you, but only in a place I can't explain and can't show you from the outside. And you'll have to trust a man you met once, a decade ago, who took too long to come back. I know how that sounds. I'm asking anyway. She looked at me, this small, exhausted, brilliant person who'd cracked an uncrackable array by herself and still ended up on a leash. And she made the bet. Because the alternative was dying in the dirt, and because some stubborn part of her had apparently kept my old contact address all those years for a reason. I brought her into my hidden heaven, and my divine sense found every one of the mother worms brewed inside her and killed them one by one while she watched the impossible garden bloom around her. And when it was done, she was free. Actually free, goo-free, market-free, gu-orenji-free, for the first time in her adult life. And then I offered her the third road, the real one, no leash in it. Stay and build, not as a rescued thing that owes me. As the architect of this whole world, the one person alive who could turn my garden from a lucky miracle into a designed one. I covered her cultivation, one foundation pill every 5 years, everything her weak root needed and the outside world had denied her. And in return, she'd do the thing she was born to do and had never once been allowed to, build. She cried. Then she stopped and looked around at a whole hidden world waiting to be given a shape. And I watched a decade of being cornered fall off her and something else stand up in its place. She'd never traveled 100 li from that market in her life. And now she had a country to design. She said yes. And the first thing she did was start telling me everything that was wrong with how I'd built the place, which is exactly how I knew I'd chosen right. Shenyi's vision for my hidden heaven was bigger than anything I'd dared to imagine for it, and I'd imagined a lot. I'd been running the place like a farm with good soil. She looked at it and saw an engine that hadn't been switched on. Layer the right formations, she said, 5-element arrays keyed to attribute-matched spirit trees, soul harvest arrays that automatically banked every small death, gathering arrays feeding the banner and the bone tower, and the garden would stop needing me to run it. It would generate its own 5-element cycle. It would grow on its own, compound on its own, become a true grotto heaven instead of a treasure I carried. A world that farmed itself while I slept. And she built the one gadget that changed daily life inside it, the Tongguang mirror. A pair of scrying mirrors that let the guild watch the outside world through my eyes when I let them, so the people in my heaven, who by the nature of the place couldn't come and go freely, could still see the sky and the markets and the war they were arming me for. It turned a hidden refuge into a hidden nation with a window. It gave a decade-cornered girl her first look at the cultivation world she'd never been allowed to walk in. And it turned my guild of freed artisans into something better than a workshop, a think tank that could see the board I was playing on and help me play it. I bought 10 of them, best money I ever spent that didn't explode. I'll be honest that a part of me had wanted to build the place as a vault with the door welded from my side. The mountain's own logic, just pointed the other way. Shenyi built me a window instead, and the window made it stronger. And that's a lesson I keep having to relearn from the people I rescue. A home you can see out of holds better than a cage you can't. While she rebuilt my heaven, the outside world finished tightening the noose. And I want you to hear exactly how, because it's the moment the war stopped being a prophecy and became a wall. 3 years earlier, I only pieced it together later. Manhwa Sect had, in a single day, mobilized every golden core and every foundation disciple it had to every subordinate spirit mountain at once. And issued a decree that ended everyone's illusions. Foundation cultivators were made to cast soul lamps on the spot, so the sect would know the instant any of them died. Spirit mountains could no longer be abandoned. Mortals could no longer migrate. Private migration meant your whole clan exterminated. Every foundation cultivator would live and die with the sect and stand ready for conscription. And anyone who fled Song country would be pursued 1,000,000 li and their bloodline wiped out. Each family was permitted one small spark in Yuyu City, 10 Kai raffiners, 500 mortals, a seed to survive the burning. And the compensation for a foundation cultivator who died in the war to come was, of course, foundation pills. Always the pills. The whole civilization reorganized around dying well for the mountain. I heard all this and understood that there was now genuinely no exit but through. No hiding, no fleeing, no waiting it out. Reach foundation before the war and be a player, or stay a Kai refiner and be one of the 90%. The countdown I'd been racing for years had just published its terms. And here's the strange thing, the thing that told me most about the world I lived in. Guo Tianyu, Guo Ming's father, the mid-foundation cultivator I'd made an enemy of years ago, got the news of his son's death buried quietly as killed by a beast. His little spark clan dispersed, and got the war decree in the same season, and he did not despair. He was exhilarated. Decades of walking on thin ice, of hoarding and hiding and never daring to fight. And finally, the mountain was going to let him hold a sharp sword and go forward. We cultivators, he said, should carry sharp blades and forge ahead. His only son was dead, and his answer was joy at the coming slaughter. That's what the climb does to a man over centuries. It doesn't just cap his life. It hollows out everything in him that isn't the climb, until a war that will probably kill him reads as a gift, because at least it's finally motion. I looked at Guo Tianyu's joy, and I felt something in me flinch just slightly, because I could see the road that ended there, and I could see that I was on it. I wanted to live forever. He'd wanted to live forever too, once, before the wanting ate everything else and left a man who greeted his son's death as a scheduling opportunity. I set it under the longest heading I keep, the one labeled "Do Not Become This." And I went back to work, because the only thing scarier than the war was arriving at it unready. I attended Lin Xiaoru's foundation celebration around then, and it recalibrated my sense of scale in a way I needed. She'd established, and her family threw the kind of banquet that shows you the true size of the thing you're fighting. 30-odd golden core elders in one room. Over 100 Duanmu family foundation cultivators from one family standing around eating candied fruit. Do the arithmetic across the 9 great families, and you get something like 2,000 foundation cultivators. And my whole clever hidden army, my dragons and my bone tower and my banner, was a knife I'd built to survive exactly one of them at a time. The banquet was my reminder that I was a very sharp, small thing in a very large dark, and that I can kill a foundation cultivator now, and I can survive a war of thousands of them were separated by an ocean I hadn't finished crossing. The comedy of the thing kept me sane. 30 golden core elders, beings who could level cities, and they bickered like misers over who owed whom a nicer gift. And secretly one-upped each other about the hidden third-order beasts and refined corpses in their vaults, like old men comparing fishing stories. Even at the top of the world, it's all still just people, keeping score, afraid of looking poor in front of the neighbors. I found that unaccountably comforting. If the golden cores were just frightened people with better toys, then the distance between them and me was a matter of toys, and toys I could get. Lin Yuan, the golden core ancestor, Lin Xiaoru's master, watched me across that banquet with a look I was learning to recognize. The look of a powerful man deciding whether to collect you. I let him look. A disciple slot under a golden core was another kind of leash, and also another kind of shield. And I hadn't decided yet which one it was, and undecided is a fine place to keep a powerful man's interest. Then I went to make an ally out of the most dangerous woman on Yin Corp's peak. And I did it the way I do everything, by finding the one true thing she was starving for, and being the only person in her life willing to say it to her face. Yin Feihua was a foundation cultivator, the daughter of a golden core elder of Yin Corp's peak. And she was, by the time I met her, a deeply unhappy woman living inside a body her own power had ruined. Her technique had made her grotesquely heavy, a side effect she couldn't reverse, that had turned a proud woman into something she couldn't stand to see in a mirror. And she'd responded the way wounded power always responds up here, by surrounding herself with beautiful things she could control. In her case, handsome young male followers kept close, kept fawning. I'll leave what happened to the ones who fell out of favor in the file with everything else Yin Corp's peak does. It wasn't kind, and I won't dress it up and I won't dwell on it. The point is she was a lonely, ruined, dangerous person, feared and flattered and never once told a true word. And that made her the easiest, powerful person I ever won over, because the currency she was actually starving for was the one nobody would spend on her. The Wang brothers set it up as a trap, which is the funny part. Wang Yaoyan and Wang Yufu, old Chen Wei's sons, the crippled boy whose leg my manhwa broke and his brother, carrying the same grudge they'd carried since we all had roots tested on the same mountain, engineered my invitation to Yin Feihua's gathering. hoping she'd take a fancy to me and refine me into one of her corpse servants, or that I'd offend her and she'd do it out of spite. A borrowed knife. Get the terrifying Foundation woman to kill the enemy they couldn't touch. It was actually a decent plan. They just didn't understand what I do in a room. I brought her 5 dragon corpses as a gift, which got her attention. And then I did the thing none of her followers, none of her flatterers, none of her father's guests had ever dared do. I told her the truth warmly, and made it a kindness instead of a wound. I praised the one thing about her that was genuinely, objectively beautiful, her eyes, which were, and I looked at her ruined body without flinching and without pity, and I told her plainly, as a fellow cultivator reading a technique, that a power like hers doesn't take without giving, that the heaviness was a phase her art would pass through, and that when it finished restructuring her, it would very likely give the beauty back and more. I don't actually know if that was true. But it was the thing she needed a single person in the world to believe, and I said it like I believed it. And I watched a Foundation cultivator's centuries-old heart knot loosen, a notch because a stranger had treated her grief as a problem with a solution instead of a joke with a punchline. She warmed to me completely. Called me junior nephew, then junior brother. Half offered at one point to make me her Tao companion, with 3 Foundation pills laid on the table as the courting gift, which tells you exactly how starved she was for one honest voice, that she'd offer a fortune and a partnership to the first man who'd looked at her like a person. I deflected it gracefully, gave her no wound in the deflecting, and turned the whole thing into a trade instead. Because a Tao companion is a leash and a trade partner is a bridge, and I have always preferred bridges. And what a trade it became. I brought her 800 dragon corpses over the following season. In return, she gave me 500 elite white bone generals, Yin Corpse generals, each as strong as a Jayal on guard, self-growing, cheap to control, and the second-order refining secret to make more. And the white bone true art, a body-refining scripture that turns a cultivator's own skeleton into a weapon and feeds on beast bones, which slotted into my garden's endless supply like it had been waiting for me. The pitch that closed it is one I'm a little proud of, as pitches go. She hesitated at selling her family's secret techniques. Those belong to the Yin clan, not to her. And I said, the secret belongs to the family. The strength belongs to you. Picture it, you, leading 100 white bone generals across the battlefield, your own army, your own name, your own road to golden core, and the head of your own clan, instead of your father's dutiful daughter waiting for scraps. 500 dragon corpses to gift the Yin Juniors buys you a faction. And I watched her rationalize selling her clan's crown jewels to build her own power. Because I'd shown her the one door she'd never let herself look at, the door where her ruin became her ambition. Both of us made a fortune. She got a road out of her father's shadow. I got a self-growing army of 500 bone generals and a body-refining scripture, and the Wang brothers got to watch their borrowed knife turn into my newest trade partner. And there is no feeling in the world quite like a trap springing backward onto the men who set it. The Wang brothers, cornered, Yin Feihua now fond of me, their scheme in ashes, me openly promising to settle with them the day I reached Foundation, did the only thing men like that ever do. They planted another rumor, another borrowed knife, whispered in the ear of a jealous second-order body cultivator named Wang Qiang that I meant to court Yin Feihua, hoping his envy would do their killing for them. Whoever dies, they figured, we win. It's not a bad instinct, using other people's feelings as weapons. It's just that I'd been doing it longer and better since I was a servant reading footsteps through a wall. And a scheme is only as good as the schemers read on the board, and the Wang brothers had never once, in all our years, correctly read the board. I let it ride. I never leave the sect before the moment I've chosen, and I let their little knives gather in the drawer, because I had somewhere much more important to be first, beside my oldest friend who was dying. Zio Yun was the first friend I ever contracted, and she almost died becoming what she was meant to be. And I want to tell this one straight, no jokes, because there aren't any in it. She had a poor bloodline. That was the truth of her from the start, a falcon whose spirit was always stronger than her blood, a bird trying to climb higher than her body was built to go. I'd fed her, awakened her, carried her from a scared thing hiding under her wings from the sky beasts to a hunter who rained wind blades from the roof of the world. But second order was a wall her blood didn't want to clear. And forcing her over it meant 3 second-order demon cores and a gamble with her life on the table. By the 4th day of it, she was fading. The breakthrough had stalled halfway, and it was pulling her apart. And I could see her going, my first friend, the falcon who'd followed a servant's whistle out of a locked courtyard and stayed loyal through every cold thing I'd become since. So I opened my own palm with a blade. Because here's what the Azure Wood scripture had made of me over all these years, the thing I'd only ever spoken of as a fear. My body had become living spirit medicine. My blood was a tonic. I'd been so afraid of that, of being the thing that other cultivators farm, of ending up harvested like the buyers the golden and silver twins fed on, and in the end the fear turned out to be a gift. Because the one time it mattered most, I could bleed for the people I loved and have the blood be worth something. I fed Zio Yun my blood, and when the first cut wasn't enough I cut again, and again, 3 more days of it, pale and drained and shaking, gambling my own strength into a dying bird like an addict who can't leave the table. Because leaving the table meant she died, and I was not going to be the man who let her die to keep his own color in his cheeks. On the 7th day she broke through. She came up out of its second order, whole, blazing, and she looked at me, this drained gray thing that had bled itself half-empty for her, and I looked at her. And I'll tell you the truest sentence I know about myself, the one under all the schemes and the lists and the banked souls. I said it out loud to a falcon in an empty room. I and Zio Yun are the same kind, born with a spirit too big for the blood we got, clawing at a wall the world built to keep us small. And every time I look at her eyes, my Tao heart gets firmer, because she never once asked whether the climb was allowed. She just climbed and trusted me at her back, and I would open every vein I have before I'd betray that. That's the thing the funnel could never touch in the end. Not the pills, not the war, not the shut door. There were a handful of people, and one falcon, and a golden centipede, and a small stubborn guild of the rescued, who'd looked at the cold thing I was building myself into and decided to trust it anyway. And for them, the cold thing kept one warm room it would burn the whole world before it let anyone reach. You can call that love, or you can call it the last unhedged bet of a man who hedges everything. Same thing, from the inside. Then I put my color back in my cheeks and I went back to being the other thing, because the war didn't care how much I'd bled for a bird. Around then I collected a soul I'd been owed for years, Zhu Heaping's. You remember Zhu Heaping, the righteous one, right about everything, whose soul I'd had whipped hollow to keep him from burying my sisters. He hadn't stayed down. A soul-ruined man with nothing to lose had gone and found a darker road than the one I'd left him on, apprenticed himself to the corpse path, started refining his own living body into a thing half-dead, cold and eerie and warping by the year. And at the end of that road he'd come apart, and I banked his ranting soul into the longevity banner. And I let him say his piece, because a man's entitled to his last speech even when he's a ghost in your flag. He cursed me. Cursed the sect, blamed me and the mountain for everything that had happened to him, the sect, the whip, the ruin, all of it. And he wasn't entirely wrong, which is what made it hard. But I answered him cold and point by point, because I'd earned the right to. You never once treated your fellow disciples as fellows, I told him. You'd have burned my sisters to score a point off the mission hall, and when I gave you a society, you turned it into a pyramid. And when the whip took your soul, you didn't ask what you'd done, you asked who to blame. The sect built the machine. But you, Zhu Heaping, you were just a smaller man building smaller funnels all the way down. Conquer the 4 directions with me now. It's the closest to fellowship you and I were ever going to get. Then I turned the flag, and his voice went into the roar of 10,000 others. And I felt exactly nothing, which frightened me a little, and I filed the fear and moved on. The Wang brothers, watching all this from a safe distance, chose that moment to flee the sect entirely rather than wait around for the day I reached Foundation. I let them run. I never leave before my moment, but their running told me my moment was close. And there was one piece of unfinished business I intended to settle in front of the whole sect before I left it. A loud, swaggering fool who'd made the one mistake I never forgive. Zhu Cheng had said the Wang sisters' names out loud, as things he intended to own. Zhu Cheng threw himself a Foundation establishment celebration, and he made it the last good day of his family's life without knowing it. Understand who Zhu Cheng was because he's a type, and the type is important. 3 generations of his clan had scrimped and hoarded and robbed to pool the stones for one Foundation pill. And they'd spent all of it on him, the whole family's century of clawing, poured into one swaggering young man so he could stand at the top of the outer sect and finally be somebody. And the first thing he did with being somebody was throw a banquet and treat me as if I were already dead. And announce to the room, openly, grinning, as a man announces a purchase, that he intended to take the Wang sisters as concubines. He said their names out loud as things. I have a very short list of things I do not forgive, and it has exactly one entry. And Zhu Cheng had just read it aloud at his own party. Here's what he didn't know. The day before his banquet, I'd had Xingyao settle the Zhu clan's account. I'll tell you it was done, and I'll tell you it was thorough, and I won't tell you any more than that. Because it happened far away and off stage, and there is nothing in the details worth carrying. The whole Zhu clan, 3 generations of hoarders who'd raised a son to buy women with his rank, ceased to be a going concern, quietly in a single night, by a borrowed hand and a borrowed token, before their golden boy had finished addressing his wedding invitations. His family was already gone. He just didn't know it yet, standing there at the head of his table, planning to own my sisters, the last living member of a dead house toasting a future that had ended the previous evening. Then I walked in. I didn't bring an army. This was the sect. There are rules inside it, and anyway an army would have missed the point. I brought myself and I walked to the head of his banquet, and I gave him the truth as a gift, the way I'd given it to the dying elder and to Yin Feihua and to everyone I've ever really finished, cold, complete, and impossible to answer. You're not a person, I told him in front of everyone. You're a foundation establishment puppet. Everything you are was decided for you. 3 generations chose your pill, chose your rank, chose your face at this table. You never made one decision in your life except which women to name out loud. And you couldn't even get that right. You think you rose, you were spent. Your whole family emptied itself into you like a purse, and here you are, the coin they bought, mistaking being expensive for being strong. Then I trashed his banquet, overturned the feast, scattered the fine things, and for a gift, because a guest brings a gift, I handed out hell money, the paper coin you burn for the dead, to every man at his table, and let them understand exactly whose funeral they were attending. And I challenged him formally in front of the whole outer sect to the life and death arena, the one place 2 disciples are allowed to try to kill each other with the sect's blessing. He wanted to take it. You could see it. Rage and a foundation cultivator's fresh certainty and the terrible vertigo of a man who's just been told something is wrong at home. But his father and his grandfather, the 2 old hoarders who'd built him, held his arms and would not let him step forward because they'd looked at me. And at the reputation that walked in with me, the masked man who reverse-killed foundation elders in the Greenwood swamp, and they'd done the arithmetic their golden boy was too young and too proud to do. Their whole century's investment would die in that arena, so they held him back in front of everyone and made him swallow it, which was worse for him than the arena would have been because the arena would have been over quickly. And then the thing happened that I hadn't scripted and valued more than any of it. My people piled in. Not on my order, I hadn't given one. Lin Zioru and Yang Yufeng and Big Guo Lihua and the whole courtyard of disciples I'd fed and funded and stood beside over the years, they all stepped forward around me, unprompted, a wall of them, and made it clear that the challenge to Zhu Cheng was a challenge to all of them. I'd spent years telling myself that the loyalty I bought was interest-bound, transactional, a lift-a-drowning man calculation. And then I stood in a wrecked banquet hall and watched a dozen people put themselves between me and a foundation cultivator's fury for free. And I understood that somewhere in all the buying I'd accidentally built the one thing you can't buy, and I didn't have a cold word for it, and I didn't try to find one. Yiming was not among them. The leaker, the shifty one, the man who'd sold my secrets years ago, he stood at the edge of the room, friendless, watching the whole outer sect close ranks around the sack boy he'd once thought beneath him. And I watched him understand that his road had narrowed to nothing, that there was no faction left that would have him, that he'd bet on the wrong man in every single hand, and the game was almost over. I didn't have to do anything to Yiming in the end. The board did it. That's the thing about setting the table instead of playing the pieces. Sometimes you don't even have to make the move. You just have to have built the game so that the man beats himself. That was my goodbye to the sect that had stamped no way out on my forehead. I'd come in a nameless commoner with a forgettable route and a booklet a lunatic threw at me. I left having reverse-killed foundation elders, armed a hidden nation, turned enemies into trade partners and golden cores into pieces, and closed the account of a man who said my sister's names as things. Not bad for a broom, but the sect wasn't the destination. It never had been. The war was coming, and the door to the war had a name, and the name was the Lingyao Garden, and everyone who was anyone was about to be poured into it, including, at last, me. The way into the Lingyao Garden ran through the sect's grand competition, a tournament held once a decade to pick the top 1,000 outer disciples for the realm run. And I approached it the way I approach everything, which is to say I made money on it before I'd thrown a single punch. I bet 300,000 stones on Lei Tian to sweep the whole thing. Yes, that Lei Tian, the arrogant one, the one I'd already told to his face that he was dead, the one at the top of my list. Betting a fortune on the man I intended to kill is exactly the kind of thing that makes people think I'm complicated. And I'm not, I'm just practical. Lei Tian was going to win. He'd always had that main character gravity, and even stripped of his parasite, he was a genuinely gifted sword cultivator. And the arena doesn't care about my private lists, so I bet on the truth. He won 5 straight, swept his bracket, and I collected 1.2 million stones off the fool's own excellence. Which meant Lei Tian personally funded a good chunk of the army I was going to use to kill him. I found that very satisfying, and I did not tell him because some pleasures are better kept. My own qualifying matches I won without moving my feet. That was deliberate, and it was a message, not a mercy. I stood still, and I raised one shield, and I drew one sword. And I let my opponents break themselves on roughly half of what my 5-element sword art could actually do, enough to win cleanly and look effortless, not enough to show the real shape of me. Because the arena was full of watching eyes, and the eyes I wanted belonged to the golden cores. A disciple who wins by spending a fortune in bombs is a rich nobody. A disciple who wins standing still, showing half his power like a man with plenty in reserve, is a prospect. Lin Yuan watched me do it and hinted again at that disciple slot. Yin Fei Hua watched and hinted the same. I let them both watch and both hint and committed to neither. Because an undecided prospect keeps 2 golden cores interested and a decided one just has a master. Then the real terms of the garden run came out, and they turned a herb-gathering trip into the opening move of the war. Golden cores were entering this time. And foundation cultivators in force. This wasn't a competition anymore. It was a prelude, a first clash of the 5-sect war dressed up as a secret Trelm expedition. And the prize list said so plainly. Enemy sect tokens, 100 flowers, blood fiend the others, could be traded for foundation pills. A golden core head brought back meant the sect itself would form your golden core for you. Herbs over 700 years old had to be surrendered to the sect. They were sending us in to kill each other's disciples across sect lines and calling it a harvest. Because a war needs its soldiers blooded and its infiltrators purged and its survivors hardened, and the Lingyao Garden was where all 3 would happen at once. The days before the launch were a parade, and the parade told me exactly what I'd built. One after another, my pieces came to see me off, and every one of them came the same way, half in grief, half scraping a gift off me while they still could. Why Sanji and why Lily? Lai Mei, Yang Yufeng, Hua Rong from the restaurant. And Lei, each one mourning a little because the garden killed most of who went in, and each one asking in the same breath for a few more Jaya along guards, a stack of Earth Escape talismans, a handful of armor-piercing cones, my people, arming themselves out of my vault on the way to a war, weeping and haggling in the same sentence. And I loved them for it because grief that still remembers to negotiate is the only kind that survives out here. I gave to each of them, and to each of them I said the same thing gently. So they'd carry it right. Once you agree to serve, failing to deliver makes me unhappy. It sounds cold written down. It wasn't cold. It was the kindest thing I could give a person walking into that garden, a reason to come back alive that was simpler and more reliable than courage. Don't die for me. Just don't disappoint me. It's a bar low enough to clear even when you're afraid. Yang Yufeng came with harder news. Her grandfather master, Old Cow, the lonely foundation cultivator whose dead granddaughter she'd played until the playing became real, the man who'd secretly slipped me a storage pouch of gifts years ago for mending their bond, his soul lamp had gone out. He was dead, killed, or spent somewhere in the tightening of the war machine. And Yang Yufeng was alone again, truly alone this time, the last of her line twice over. And she still insisted on going into the garden by herself, to keep chasing the clan vengeance she'd carried since her father died 2 days a foundation cultivator. I didn't talk her out of it. Some fires you can't put out and shouldn't try. You can only make sure the person carrying them has good enough gear to reach the thing they're burning toward. I loaded her down and let her go and added the family that had wiped out the jinns to the long back pages of my own list. Because her fire had become, somewhere over the years, a little bit mine. And standing in the middle of that parade of gifts and grief, I finally understood what I'd made of myself. And it wasn't what I'd set out to make. I'd started as a sack boy who wanted to not die. And I'd become a man with a country in his head, and a nation of the rescued inside it, and 100 pieces scattered across the board. And I realized, watching them come and go, arming themselves with my dragons, that I'd stopped being a player who sets the board and started becoming the board itself. A clan, a faction, a hidden heaven, a web of allies and trade partners and debts, all of it me. All of it pointed at the same faraway thing I'd wanted since I was 6 and starving with a garden I couldn't eat. Longevity, not for its own sake, not anymore, for theirs. Somewhere in all the scheming, the thing I wanted to keep alive forever had quietly grown to include other people. And I hadn't noticed it happen, and I couldn't have stopped it if I'd tried. I still can't play chess, by the way. Lin Zioru still beats me every single time, but I'd stopped needing to win the game. I'd become the table and the players and the room. And the rules, and you don't have to be good at chess to win when the whole board answers to you. Then the sect called us to the launch, and the sky filled with dragons, and a being appeared whose aura made every hair on my body stand up straight. And the war I'd spent my whole life preparing for finally began. Lin Yuan gave me a gift before the launch that told me the Golden Core ancestor had made up his mind about me, even if I hadn't made up mine about him. A meridian-expanding pill, cooked from 300-year herbs, the kind of thing a golden core gives a prospect he intends to collect. It pushed my power up to the full height of the 5-element sword art, no more holding half in reserve, and it did something I hadn't expected. It broke a seal on my cloud-stepping boots I hadn't even known was there. And suddenly they ran at mid-foundation speed, fast enough to outrun most of what the garden could throw at me. A recruit signal wrapped in a weapon. I took it, and bowed and committed to nothing, because a man about to walk into a war wants every advantage and none of the leashes. And the pill was an advantage whether or not I ever wore the leash it came with. I'll take one honest inventory here just this once, because you deserve to know what walked into that garden, and then I promise I'll stop counting. 8 second-order centipedes that swim through stone, a second-order falcon I'd bled myself gray to raise. A banner heavy with 300 second-order ghosts and Su Hong's elite refined dragon souls. A tower of white bone holding 500 self-growing generals, 80 dragon-scale puppets. Boots that tore holes in space. A body slowly turning to spirit wood. And a hidden heaven behind my eyes with a nation of the rescued inside it, arming me from the dark. The sack boy who left a locked courtyard in hemp clothes had turned himself into a one-man army with a country in his skull. And then the Wanfa nascent soul ancestor appeared, and reminded me how small a one-man army actually is. He didn't do anything. He just arrived, and his aura rolled across 10,000 disciples like a tide across pebbles, and my hair stood on end, and my knees remembered they were a Kai Raffiner's knees. And I understood in my bones the thing the Golden Core banquet had only shown me in numbers. There are floors above my floors, all the way up, and the being standing at the top of this one could have ended me and everyone I loved with a thought and a yawn. I'd spent years learning to kill foundation cultivators. He was to a foundation cultivator what a foundation cultivator is to a rabbit. I put the fear where I keep the rest, in the folder marked Why I Can Never, Ever Stop, and I kept my face still. He gave us the war's true rules, and they were exactly as bloody as the prize list had promised. This was not a herb run. Enemy tokens meant pills. A golden core head meant the sect would build your core for you. Anything over 700 years old belonged to the mountain. And to arm us for it, the sect handed every one of its 1,100 disciples a black Wanfa sword and 5 thunder beads each, 1,100 desperate cultivators, each with 5 ways to take someone down with them, poured into a suppressed realm alongside 4 rival sects worth of the same. 100 purple-robed personal disciples went in at the head of us, Lin Zioru and the golden core-blooded Liang King among them. And we rode south on 9 third-rank flood dragons, 100 Zhang of dragon each, the sky black with them, 10,000 cultivators carried toward the opening of the war on the backs of monsters. I stood on a dragon's spine with the wind tearing past, and I let myself have one warm, foolish thought, the way you do before something enormous. And I'll share it because it's the truest map of my heart there is. After this, I thought, after I reach foundation, after the garden, after the war, I'm going to go home. Not to the sect, home. Back to the Wang Manor in Jiayuan City, where a 6-year-old wrapped in a rice sack once knelt and scrubbed steps that led nowhere. And I'm going to walk in the front gate a free man and an immortal, and I'm going to find the 2 young ladies I used to serve. And I'm going to ask them very seriously to play a game with me. The wicked servant, I'll call it. They'll be the young misses again, just for an afternoon, and I'll be the sack boy, and we'll act out the whole thing from the beginning. The kneeling, the bowing, the yes, young miss. And then somewhere in the middle of it we'll all start laughing. Because we'll all know how the story actually turned out, that the broom became the storm, that the sack boy grew a country in his head and walked it all the way to the sky. I asked the Wang sisters on the dragon's back whether they'd play along when the time came. Mei Ling smiled the small steady smile she'd smiled at me since I was 6. Manhua told me I was an idiot, which is how Manhua says yes. And I turned back to the wind and the war ahead, and I held that afternoon in front of me like a lamp, because a man needs one warm thing to walk toward when he's walking into the dark. And mine was a game of pretend with the 2 people who decided, on the worst morning of their lives, that the sack boy shouldn't be left with nothing. Then the 9 dragons crossed the last mountains, and below us the Lingyao garden cracked open like an eye. And I found out what the immortal world does when it finally stops pretending to have rules. 5 sects came to the Lingyao garden, and I want to lay them out on the field for you. Because the picture is the whole point. From the north, the 100 Flowers Palace, over 2,000 women, the widest net in Song country. From the shadows, the puppet sect, their puppet city, where you cannot tell the cultivator from the doll. Because every one of them walks in a crowd of identical copies of himself. The blood fiend sect, 800 strong, riding blood ghosts, the sect whose elder I'd reverse-killed in the swamp. The 10,000 spirits sect, 700 corpse riders, Su Hong's people, my mad bride ally somewhere in their ranks. And my own manhwa, 1,100. 10,000 cultivators and more from 5 mortal enemies, converging on one secret realm at the edge of a war, every disciple gripping his sword and his 5 thunder beads and his certainty that he was about to fight for his sect's survival. And then I saw the thing that rearranged my whole understanding of the world I'd spent my life climbing. And I have to tell it carefully because it's the coldest truth in this entire story. The 5 nascent soul patriarchs, the god-tier ancestors of the 5 warring sects, the beings whose auras made 10,000 disciples' knees buckle, were sitting together, drinking tea. Old friends at their leisure above the garden, chatting like men at a village well while their armies massed to slaughter each other below. The war was rigged, not influenced, not quietly negotiated. Rigged, top to bottom, a staged production with a script. The 100 Flowers Palace and the Blood Fiend sect had been paid, actually paid, in golden core pills and 1,000-year herbs and a 4th-order puppet, to relocate their territories and let manhwa expand. The whole war was a real estate deal wearing 10,000 costumes, and the disciples. The 1,100 of us manhwa poured in, the 700 corpse riders, the 2,000 women, all of us. We were not soldiers. We were the fee. We were pawns and blood sacrifice fodder, sent in to die by the 1,000 so the surviving disciples would be tempered in real slaughter. So the sect's hidden infiltrators would be flushed and purged in the chaos, so the ledgers would balance in blood instead of stones. The patriarchs would spar for entertainment, carefully, never risking themselves, and at the end of it manhwa would inherit the 100 Flowers land. And everyone at the tea table would go home, and the ones who didn't go home would be us. I stood on my dragon and I looked up at 5 gods drinking tea over the graveyard they'd scheduled. And every single thing I'd ever believed about the funnel clicked into its final, complete shape. I'd spent my whole life thinking the trap was the pills. 200 a decade, 70% reserved, the door shut. I'd thought if I was clever enough and cold enough I could exploit the trap. And I'd found the crack I'd taken instead of earned. But I'd been picking a lock on a door. And now I could see the wall the door was set into, and the wall went up forever. The pills weren't the trap. The pills were a detail. The trap was that the whole world, top to bottom, was a rigged game run by people who could not be reached, who wrote wars like grocery lists and spent 10,000 lives to save themselves a negotiation, and who would go on doing it long after every disciple in that garden was a soul in someone's banner or a corpse in someone's retinue. You cannot beat a game like that. Not with schemes. Not with a hidden army. I understood, standing there with total clarity, that if any one of those tea-drinking patriarchs turned his idle attention my way, my dragons and my ghosts and my whole clever country would matter exactly as much as a rabbit's plans matter to the man skinning it. a golden core I could kill. A nascent soul I could not survive, and there were 5 of them up there deciding my afternoon over tea. Most men, learning that the game is rigged all the way up, break. Some go the way of zoo heaping and rage. Some go the way of Guo Tianyu and hollow out, and learn to greet the slaughter as motion. And a few, the ones who were always going to make it or die trying, do the only thing left that isn't surrender. They stop trying to beat the game, and they start trying to climb high enough to sit at the tea table. That's the moment the Sackboy's real ambition was born, up there on the dragon's spine, watching 5 gods schedule my death for their convenience. Not foundation, not golden core. Not even longevity anymore, not exactly. I wanted to reach the table. I wanted to climb until I was one of the untouchable few who write the wars instead of dying in them, and then I wanted to do the one thing none of them had ever done, which was to reach back down into the graveyard and pull my own people up out of it before the next war got scheduled. The whole hidden heaven in my head, the nation of the rescued, I'd built it as a refuge. Now I understood it was a lifeboat, and I was going to have to row it all the way to the top of a world that had welded every door on the way. Impossible, completely impossible. A Kai refiner with a garden in his skull, planning to climb past 5 nascent souls to overturn the oldest rigged game there is. I looked up at the tea table one more time. And I felt the old thing settle in me, the thing that had gotten a starving 6-year-old to 13 and a sackboy to the sky. Fine. Impossible. I'd been told the funnel had no crack, and I'd found it. I'd been told there was no way out for outer disciples, and I'd walked out with an army. Impossible was just a word powerful people used to make weak people stop reaching. And I had never once in either of my lives been willing to stop reaching. But that was tomorrow's war. Today's war was the one below me, the real one, the father's one, 10,000 pawns about to be poured into a killing ground so the gods could balance a ledger. And a pawn who knows the game is rigged has exactly one move that matters. Survive the board, take everything he can off the dead, and come out the far side stronger than the men who sent him in ever intended. The garden opened, and I went down into it to do what I do. The garden had its own rules, and they were designed to make the slaughter efficient. The moment you entered, it scattered you random teleport, everyone flung to a different corner, no staying with your allies, no formations held. A 1-year timer, and then it spat you out. And no marks of friend or foe, your own sect brother and your worst enemy looked identical in the fog. So every meeting was a coin flip with your life on it, and cultivation itself was suppressed inside, pressed down a notch, so that the men who'd bought their power with pills and background were brought closer to the men who'd earned theirs the hard way. It was a machine built to turn 10,000 cultivators into 10,000 cornered animals and see what crawled out. What crawled out mostly was the truth about people, and the garden showed it to me in pairs, and I've never forgotten the pairs. I came across a blood fiend man and woman, a cultivating couple, cornered by me at the same time, and each of them, separately in the same breath, begged me to spare them by enslaving the other. Soul search my partner, take everything they know, keep me. Each one offered up the person they'd walked into hell beside, instantly without a flicker, to buy 1 more hour. I hadn't asked. I hadn't even decided what to do with them yet. They just volunteered each other because that's what the machine does, it strips the paint off. And underneath, more often than not, is a thing that will sell the person next to it for a heartbeat's advantage. And then, an hour later, in a different part of the fog, I watched 2 leopards, beasts, dumb animals, second-order garden beasts, fight me back to back until they both went down together, neither one running, neither one selling the other. Because the thing the blood fiend couple didn't have was a thing the leopards were born with. I stood over the 2 dead cats, and I thought about the 2 living cultivators. And I sat with it in the folder I try hardest not to look at, the one that asks quietly what I am and what I'm building my heaven out of. Here's what I built it out of in the garden. I stopped killing the ones worth keeping. That was my whole strategy, and it doubled my haul while everyone else was busy dying. Everyone in the garden was hunting tokens and herbs and heads. I was hunting people, the clever, cornered, sellable ones, and instead of killing them for a token, I offered them a bargain. Serve me for the duration, farm the herbs, gather the tokens, and live. A cornered cultivator who's just watched everyone around them die will take a live master over a dead heroism 9 times in 10. And the 10th one I let walk. I recruited a blood fiend woman named Zhu Jing that way, cowardly, sharp, exactly the survivor type that thrives on a bargain and struck a clean deal. Your knowledge and your labor for the year, my protection and a cut of the harvest. And when the garden spits us out, you keep your life and go, not a slave. A hire in a place where the only alternative I was offering was the ground. She took it so fast it was almost insulting, and she was worth every herb she gathered. And then Lei Tian found me, and I got to pay the oldest promise on my list. He came through the fog riding a butterfly's mark of his own, one twin of the illusion dream pair. It turned out, the two insects drawn to each other across the whole garden, which meant that whichever of us moved, the other could follow. He'd been hunting me the moment we both landed. And he'd been saving something for me, something he'd built specifically for this. And when he found me, he fired it. A Ning Yuan thorn, a magical condensed from a full decade of his cultivation poured into a single strike, a spear of everything he had. It went through 4 of my second-order centipedes like they were paper. It punched through the white bone tower's shield. A decade of a gifted sword cultivator's life, focused to a needle, and it came for my heart faster than thought. And it didn't reach it, because I'd spent years turning my own body into spirit wood and my own instincts into a spatial break twist. And the cloud-stepping boots tore a hole in the world, and I was a hand's width to the left of where his decade landed. The thorn buried itself in the ground where my heart had been, and spent itself, and Lei Tian stood there having fired the best shot of his entire life at me and missed, with nothing left in reserve. And I watched the thing happen that I'd promised him years ago in a sect corridor. His spine went out of him. His arrogance, the main character gravity, the certainty that the rest of us were scenery, it broke right there all at once. Because he'd finally met the moment where being gifted wasn't enough, and he had no plan for a world in which being gifted wasn't enough. He'd never needed one. He'd always been the most talented person in every room. And now he was on his knees in the fog in front of the sack boy he'd thrown a wind blade at on a whim, out of options, out of decade, out of story. I'd told him back in the sect, when you threw that wind blade, you were already dead. You just got to keep walking around for a while first. The while was over. And I want to be honest about how it ended because I promised you honesty even when I don't come off well. I didn't gloat, and I didn't make a speech, and I didn't drag it out. I'd learned a long time ago from watching a dying elder in the swamp that the enemies worth remembering are the ones who go quiet at the end. And Lei Tian, stripped of his gravity, finally went quiet. I closed the account, cleanly. And I banked what a decade-condensed sword cultivator's soul is worth into a banner that had started its life catching swift-winged rabbits. And I did not feel the nothing I'd feared I'd feel. I felt the small, cold, complete feeling of a promise kept. Which is the only kind of peace a man like me gets, and I've learned to take it where it comes. One name off the oldest list. And the garden was full of names, and full of monsters, and one of the monsters was a woman in blood red who could have 4 of my bone generals with a single slash, and who I was about to spend the strangest week of the whole war trying to kill, and completely failing to in the most exhausting way imaginable. Her name was manhwa, and she was a mid-foundation beauty of the Blood Fiend sect, and our fight was the single most ridiculous week of my life. And I mean that with real affection, because by the end of it I liked her enormously and we were business partners. It started the way these things start. She saw my army, decided I was worth robbing, and opened with a blood moon slash, her own decade-condensed strike, the blood fiend answer to Lei Tian's thorn, a crescent of red that cut 4 of my white bone generals cleanly in half before I got a shield up. A genuinely terrifying opening. And I answered and she answered that, and within about a minute we both understood the problem that defined the whole next week. Neither of us could kill the other, not quickly. She was mid-foundation and I was a Kai refiner with a monster's toolkit, and it evened out into a horrible stalemate. My army couldn't pin her fast enough to finish her. And her blood arts couldn't punch through my beasts and puppets and boots fast enough to reach me. 2 people locked in a fight that neither could win and neither could walk away from. Because the moment either of us turned to run, the other one would have the opening. So I did the thing I do, which is refuse to fight the fight the other person wants and fight a different one instead. She wanted a duel. I gave her a siege. I had the illusion dream butterfly's mark on her, so I stopped trying to beat her and started trying to exhaust her. Her whole power ran on her blood pool, a reservoir of blood essence she drew her arts from, and a reservoir is a thing you can drain if you're patient and you never let it refill. So for days, I hunted her. Not to kill her, to cost her. Nip in, force her to spend, pull back before she could spend mine, vanish, follow the mark, do it again the moment she'd started to recover. My beasts were endless, and my boots were faster than her, and my heaven refilled me while nothing refilled her. I turned a fight into an accountancy, and accountancy is the one field where I have never lost. And manhwa, to her eternal credit, refused to lose with dignity, which is what made it wonderful. Because a blood-fiend cultivator can heal from almost anything as long as there's blood. So whenever I cornered her hard enough that a normal person would surrender, she would instead theatrically kill herself, a dramatic defiant, "You'll never take me alive" self-destruction, and then, a heartbeat later, quietly heal it and pop back up to keep haggling. She did this repeatedly. She would stab herself through the heart, declare that death was preferable to my terms, collapse beautifully, and then, while I stood there, knit the wound closed and say, "So, about that counteroffer." I have never in my life negotiated with someone who used suicide as a bargaining tactic and then survived it to open the next round. By the third time, I nearly applauded. By the fifth, I understood we were going to be friends, because anyone who can turn dying into a haggling posture is my kind of person. What she was actually doing under the theater was refusing to be broken, buying face, buying time, refusing to hand me a clean surrender. And I respected it so much that I gave her a way to yield that cost her no face at all. I stopped talking about her life and started talking about a partnership, because I didn't want her dead. A dead manhwa is one soul in a banner. A living, oath-bound, blood arts manhwa is a foundation-tier weapon that hates the same rigged game I do and belongs to a rival sect with no jurisdiction over my enemies. So we made a deal, and it was a fat one. In exchange for her life and a wartime alliance, she taught me the blood moon slash, the blood spirit true art, the method of the blood soul talisman, the secret of the blood pools, a whole school of blood cultivation poured into my collection, another set of tools for the man who collects tools. And in exchange for that, she got to keep her life, keep her face, and gain the one thing her drowning sect had never offered her, a partner strong enough to be worth betraying nobody over. Rival to ally, the way I've done it a dozen times now, by the only method that reliably works, be so clearly the winner that the other person's best move is to stop being your enemy and start being your investment. She stopped killing herself after that. Mostly, she did it one more time later, purely for effect, to win a point in an argument about herb splitting. And I let her have the point, because a partnership runs on knowing which battles to lose. I want you to notice the pattern, since we're near the end, and it's the pattern of my whole life. Lei Tian came at me with a decade-condensed strike and died. Because Lei Tian was a name on my list, an old debt, a man who'd said I was scenery. manhwa came at me with the exact same kind of strike and lived and prospered. Because manhwa was a stranger with somewhere else to be, a person the machine had cornered same as me. That's the line I told you about in the swamp, the quiet one under all the loud schemes. I finish the ones who chose to pray. I hold the door for the ones who just got caught in the same trap I did. It is not mercy and it is not cruelty. It's a sorting, the same sort the garden was running on everyone, and I ran it on purpose. And I ran it true, and the shape of who I spared and who I didn't is the truest map of me there is. The garden had months left to run, and it was full of both kinds of people, and I moved through it collecting the second kind and closing accounts with the first, richer by the day, deadlier by the day. And somewhere in the fog my mad bride ally was waiting with a rival she wanted dead. And 4 vulgar brothers were about to make the last bad decision of their lives, and the war I'd spent my whole life preparing for was, at last, simply the water I swam in. Su Hong found me in the fog eventually, my mad bride ally, and our reunion is my favorite scheme in the whole garden, because it started with her trying to rob me and ended with us bickering like a married couple over corpse splitting. She'd come looking for the help I'd promised her, that golden corset rival of hers, somewhere in the garden, the woman she wanted dead. But she found me looking, deliberately, like a man who'd had a very hard war. I'd been fighting manhwa for a week. My visible forces were battered, and I let Su Hong see exactly that and no more. And my mad bride, my oath-bound partner, took one look at my apparent weakness and did the math that every cultivator in that garden did on every other cultivator, ally or not. He looks crippled. Maybe I don't need to trade with him, maybe I just take. I let her get all the way to the edge of that thought, and then I showed her what I'd been keeping in the back. 300 second-order ghosts out of the banner, 200 white bone generals out of the tower. An army she hadn't known I had, unfolding out of the fog around her palanquin, and to make the point unmistakable. Because Su Hong is a woman who respects a demonstration, I destroyed 10 of her own refined corpse servants in front of her. Not to hurt her, to teach her. To move the conversation in one gesture from maybe I take back to we trade, which is where it needed to be for both of us to get rich. She understood instantly. That's why I like her. A lesser partner would have been offended. Su Hong just recalculated, smiled under her veil, and started haggling. And we settled straight back into the old rhythm, 2 corpse and ghost cultivators arguing over the division of the dead like a couple arguing over the grocery bill, both of us secretly delighted, both of us certain we were cheating the other, which, as I've told you, is the only sign of a fair deal. I'd help her with her rival. She'd refine my garden harvest. The war rolled on and made us both wealthy. And the mad bride and the sack boy divided the corpses of a rigged slaughter between them and called it a good day's work. The 4 blood fiend brothers were a footnote, and I include them only because they're such a perfect footnote. 4 vulgar, swaggering blood fiend sect cultivators barged into the middle of one of my negotiations. Loud, crude, absolutely certain that 4 of them plus attitude equaled a threat. And they made the single most common mistake in the whole garden, which is to see a man standing calmly in the open and assume he's standing calmly in the open because he's weak. My beasts and my generals and my mad bride partner turned them into 4 more contributions to the ledger before they'd finished their opening insults. I didn't even stop the conversation. Some deaths are punctuation, and that more or less is where I have to leave the war. Because a war this size doesn't have an ending, it just has a middle that goes on until it stops, and mine hadn't stopped. So let me tell you where I stood instead when the fog was thickest, because the story of the sack boy has a shape even if the war doesn't. And I'd like to close the shape for you. I stood in the middle of a rigged slaughter run by gods over tea, and I was winning. Not the war. Nobody wins the war. The war was a real estate deal, and the disciples were the fee. But my part of it, the pawn's part, the fodder's part, the part they built the whole machine to keep small, I was winning that so thoroughly it would have made the tea drinkers choke if they'd bothered to look down. I moved through the garden collecting the sellable and closing accounts with the cruel, richer every day. An army at my back that grew with every death I caused. A nation of the rescued arming me from behind my own eyes. Allies of 3 rival sects bound to me by oath and profit. And a growing pile of enemy tokens and 1,000-year herbs and banked foundation souls that the sect had promised to pay for in the only currency that had ever been rigged against me. 12 years before, a boy wrapped in a rice sack had knelt in a locked courtyard, polishing steps that led nowhere under a standing order to die. And here he was, a masked man in the middle of a 5-sect war who reverse-killed Foundation elders for practice and split graveyards with a mad bride and carried a country full of rescued people behind his eyes. The broom had become the storm. The steps that led nowhere had led here. They told me on my very first night on that mountain, the thing everyone tells the fresh outer disciples, the thing that's carved into the whole system like a motto. There is no way out for outer disciples. It's arithmetic, they said. 200 pills a decade, 70% reserved, the door shut in your face. Nobody gets out. Give up the dream of forever and settle for your century and a half of tenant labor and be grateful for the roof. I found the way out. I found it in a garden nobody could see, and a booklet a lunatic threw at me, and 100 cold decisions I'd make again. And then I climbed high enough to see that the way out was just a bigger room, and the bigger room had a rigged game in it too. And above that room was another, all the way up to 5 old friends drinking tea over 10,000 graves they'd scheduled for a Tuesday. So the way out was never a door. I understand that now. The way out is up and it doesn't end, and every floor has a welded funnel and a tea table above it. And the only way to stop being the fee is to climb until you're one of the ones who writes the bill. That's the road in front of me now. Impossible. Completely impossible. A Kai refiner with a garden in his skull planning to climb past gods. Good. I work best with impossible. Impossible is just the word the tea drinkers use for the door they forgot to weld. I'm not going to lie to you and tell you I won the war, because the war hasn't ended. And the men who started it don't intend for it to end in any way that involves me mattering. I haven't reached Foundation yet. That's tomorrow's mountain, and there are 100 mountains after it. There are names still open on my list. Xing Hu, who leaned his spiritual pressure on a boy and never paid for it. The Wang brothers, who fled the sect rather than face me and are out there somewhere breathing my air. The family that wiped out the jinns. Which became my grudge the day it became Yang Yufeng's. There's a golden core ancestor who wants to make me his disciple and doesn't yet know that I don't wear leashes. There's a mad bride's rival and a drowning sect's whole roster. And 5 patriarchs at a tea table who have never once heard my name and will, someday if I have anything to say about it, learn it. And there's an afternoon I'm still owed. When this is over, the garden, the war, the climb, all of it, I'm going home. To the manor in Jiayuan City, to the courtyard with the steps that led nowhere. And I'm going to find the 2 young ladies I used to serve. And we're going to play the wicked servant one more time, the sack boy and the young missus, the whole cruel little script from the beginning. And somewhere in the middle of it, we're going to start laughing. Because we'll be the only 3 people in the world who know how the story actually turned out. That's the thing worth living forever for, not the pills, not the tea table. The laughing, ask me the way they asked me on that first mountain whether there's a way out for outer disciples. There isn't. There's only a way up. I'm taking it, and I'm bringing everyone I love with me all the way to the top, past every god who ever scheduled our graves. I came in wrapped in a rice sack. I'm leaving wrapped in an army. Let's find out which one of us is the rabbit now.